Chapter-121-140 Be My Maid for 3 days. Robin's pretty face was tense, and even in front of Liang, she couldn't help but feel uneasy. Her calm mentality was gone forever, and she couldn't keep calm at all. This is Liang, a terrifying monster that overwhelms the Navy by one person. Unexpectedly, the two of them met here. All I can say is, it was unfortunate. You're just trying to make things difficult for us. Tilda. Nami shivered nervously and shouted. I can't say it's embarrassing, I can only say that it's a matter of fact. In addition to the compensation for the shower gel above, you also need compensation for breaking into my castle rashly. Liang shook his head and chuckled. And compensation? Nami's eyes were round and she blurted out. That's natural. How do I know if you guys want to steal the things in my castle? When I found out that my castle entered the thief, my spirit almost collapsed, and the mental damage fee must be paid. Liang's mouth moved slightly, looking at Nami's delicate face, and said. And the mental damage fee? Nami's pretty face is dull. What are these? If the mental breakdown was caused, it was the two of them who were right. When she knew Liang's identity, her own mentality was about to collapse. Now that it's good, Liang came to catch them and won't let them go. In terms of preliminary calculations, I will give you a fair compensation price. 30 billion bells, not much, just these bells, as long as they are paid off, I will let you go. Liang pretended to think, his eyes flashed a little interesting, and said. 30 billion bellies. Nami's throat was dry, and her whole body was about to collapse. A billion berry was the nightmare she could never imagine in her life. And now, just to come in and take a bath, will you have to pay 30 billion burges? This made Nami close to the brink of collapse. Her legs were weak and she almost collapsed on the ground. Her delicate and pretty face was full of panic. Even Robin was shocked by this number, 3 billion bergs. This is a figure that they have to work for tens of thousands of years to be able to compensate. How is it, do you have 30 billion compensation? Liang's mouth moved slightly and smiled. What do you think, we'll put on something that's worth 30 billion bellies, and you let us go? We'll bring it to you now. Nami rolled her eyes and said quickly. Are you sure? Liang approached Nami in front of him, his eyes narrowed slightly, and he looked at Nami from a close distance. The distance between the two was less than 10 centimeters. Nami's crystal clear skin appeared in front of Liang, and her big eyes were full of panic. She looked around and did not dare to look at Liang. Come on, you should know my identity. Even so, you still have to play tricks in front of me. You know, if I want to find you on the sea, it won't take long to catch you. Quote. If I issue a notice, I'm afraid that the Navy headquarters will send warships to arrest you. How long do you think you can withstand the arrest of the Navy? Maybe you will say, as pirates, haven't you been arrested by the Navy all the time? Now I can tell you exactly. Those Navy who arrested you are all small. Liang said meaningfully, if I issue a wanted order, the Navy will send out its real power to arrest you. You can't escape. What do you think of us? Nami collapsed and lost her voice. 30 billion bellies, you might as well kill us. We can't compensate such a high amount of bellies in our lifetime. I'm not giving you a dead end. If you can't repay the 30 billion burges, then I have another plan here so that you can leave alive. Liang laughed. What plan? Robin's pretty face moved and heard. It's easy. Chapter-121 When My Maid for 3 days. And LT, 39 and GT. It's easy. Liang looked at Robin, moved his footsteps, walked to Robin's side, got close to less than 10 centimeters away, and could even smell the direction emanating from Robin's body. He leaned against Robin's delicate ear and smiled. You too, just be my maid for 3 days, and I'll let you out of here. 1 day is worth 10 billion berry, which makes me feel bad. 3 days of debt of 30 billion berry will be offset. I know that you are going to sail, which is why 3 days is an option I give you. Quote. Are you going to pay 30 billion berries, or be a maid for 3 days, it's up to you to choose. I don't force you, and I don't force you. Li Ang walked to the front door, admiring the two crystal clear and perfect works of art, said. Isn't this persecution? Nami murmured in her heart, but she didn't dare to say it outright. Who knows if Li Ang in front of her would suddenly do something to the two of them. If Li Ang wants to fight, I'm afraid, the two of them don't even have the ability to fight back. Robin. Nami's eyes moved, looked at Robin, and asked the other party's opinion. We promised to be your maid for 3 days. Robin thought calmly, looked at Li Ang, and gave their choice. Apart from this, they have no other way. 3 billion bergs. This number, they can never imagine in this life. Only being Li Ang's maid is the best solution for them at the moment. In that case, let's take a shower and change clothes. Next, you need to be busy. Don't be lazy. If you are lazy, the time will be doubled. After taking a last glance at the two girls' perfect bodies, Li Ang left the bathroom with a smile on his face. Seeing Li Ang leave, Nami and Robin only reacted and looked at each other. Nami whispered, should you run away? As soon as the words came out. Immediately, Li Ang's voice appeared. Don't think about escaping here, because every move of this castle is under my control. If you run away, I will find out as soon as possible, and bring you back, and triple the original time. Quote. If you don't believe me, you can try. Voices lingered around them. Nami couldn't help trembling all over her body, and she completely stopped thinking about running away. Be honest and be a maid for 3 days, and we can still leave alive. Robin took a deep breath and calmed down, said. 3 days is acceptable. After 3 days, they can leave here. If it is 30 billion bellies, they will never be able to change it in their lifetime. It's not as good as the 3-day maid, and the repayment of 10 billion bellies a day seems to be more beneficial to them. Robin. Nami looked a little weird, and the corners of her mouth moved slightly. What? Robin looked at Nami, puzzled. Just now, were completely seen by him. Nami's pretty face was instantly flushed with blood, and white smoke was coming from her head. With a swish, Robin's delicate face also turned crimson. This made the delicate faces of the two women add a bit of a strange aura, and they were so glamorous. Chapter 122 _ The basic qualities of a maid. Please customize it. Soon. Brand new, with wet hair, and walked out of the bathroom with a pair of long legs that were as white as jade, and their eyes looked around. Don't look for it, come to the living room. A melodious voice appeared, which shocked the two women, looking suspiciously beside them. Li Ang's ability was once again revealed in their sight. Let's go, I can't hide. Robin took a deep breath and said calmly. Yeah. Nami timidly grabbed Robin's arm. Her left foot was still red and swollen, and it was unrealistic to want to heal for a while. Next, it was hard for her to imagine what kind of terrible labor she would suffer. You know, she's still hurt. Hope. Don't be too nasty this guy. Nami thought to herself, with a nervous look on her pretty face. She walked to the living room with Robin and saw Li Ang sitting on the sofa. Next, I have the responsibility and the obligation to tell you how to be a qualified maid and how to improve the basic quality of the maid. Li Ang sat on the sofa with a smile on his face, looking at the two beautiful and fresh women in front of him, said. Huh. The two women looked at each other and were stunned. Please sit down. Li Ang pointed to the sofa in front and smiled. Robinami and Robinami were sitting on the sofa. Their hair was still a little water-stained, and the soft hair was like a fish and a wild goose. They seemed a little nervous and restless. The person in front of him is Li Ang. It's not easy for them to keep calm. The first point is that all the dust in the castle needs to be cleaned by you. In 3 days, I will make sure that the castle is clean. Second point, during these 3 days, you have to call me the master, and as a maid, you must have the duty of a maid, and you can't go beyond your own identity. The third point. Li Ang looked at the two girls and said with a smile. At the same time, it also tells a lot of things that the ideal maid in his mind needs to do. Nami was stunned, her pretty face was confused, her left ear went in and her right went out, and she immediately forgot what Liang said just now. Only Robin, her pretty face is very heavy, and her memory has always been very good. She also kept in mind the request made by Liang. It's just that these things are too much. In these 3 days, can you really complete so many tasks? Robin was puzzled, but did not dare to choose to speak at this time. Well, for now, that's all. Liang smiled and suddenly said, by the way, there is the most important point. Every night, as maids, you come to help me make the bed and warm the bed. You. Nami's pink lips moved slightly, her beautiful eyes widened, and she pointed at Liang. This request is too much. Excessive. Robin, what do you think? Liang looked at Robin with a smile and asked. We agreed. Robin nodded calmly and said. Robin. Nami was anxious and grabbed Robin's arm, but after feeling the firm tone of the other party, she lay helplessly on the sofa like a deflated balloon. Really? Did they have a bargain now? It's just that, at night, helping others warm the bed. Chapter 122 _ The basic qualities of maids. It's just that, at night, helping others warm the bed. This kind of thing, Nami herself really has no experience, in case he. Thinking of this, Nami's pretty face became tense, she stared at Liang, and took a half step back timidly. But she forgot that she was still injured on her left foot. Without anyone to support her, she fell to the ground by accident, and the pain made her cry, and said, it hurts. A sprained foot. Liang glanced at Nami's white ankle and said, how can you help me in this case? Come here and I will help you heal it. No need. Nami quickly blushed and shook her head. Feet are an important position for women, and most women do not want to be watched in front of men with bare feet. Come here, if your work efficiency is affected by this injury, my loss will be too great. The two of them have a debt of 10 billion berries a day, and one person has a debt of 5 billion a day. If you do the math, I will lose. How much? Liang said with a smile. 5 billion bellies. Nami couldn't help but complained in her heart. It really counts. Why don't you use some shower gel? It takes 10 billion bells a day to repay, which is too bullying. However, Nami can only think about this in her heart, and dare not say it outright. I can hear that your heart is cursing me. Liang narrowed his eyes slightly, fixed on Nami's towering position, and said meaningfully. The extreme domineering of seeing and hearing, being able to spy on the thoughts of others, this is not just talk. How did you know that? Nami was frightened, and her face was a little suspicious. I said, I can hear what's in your heart, do you believe it? Liang laughed. Huh. Nami snorted, limped to Liang's side, sat on the sofa, a little nervous, and said, take it easy. You should be to have a man who suppresses the navy treat your ankle for you. This is something that no one else can hope for. Liang pointed at the sofa and smiled, take off your shoes. Hearing this, Nami blushed and took off her shoes, revealing her delicate little feet, white as jade and flawless, but the position of her ankle was red and swollen, which looked a bit scary. It's so horribly swollen that it can have lifelong effects on you if left untreated. Liang tapped the wound lightly, and Nami shrank back in reflex, taking a deep breath. Thinking about it, she felt a lot of pain when she touched it lightly. Can it be cured? Nami lowered her head and asked. Nature. Liang grabbed the soles of Nami's feet, and the soft and smooth skin passed through the palms of his hands. For a moment, Nami's pretty face turned crimson 0.7, and she looked to the side, not daring to look at Liang's movements. Aside. Robin looked at Liang strangely. How do you feel? Liang is different from the rumored one. Before I saw it, I thought it was a man-eating monster. Looking at it now, it is a reasonable gentleman. Of course. It would be more gentlemanly if they didn't make them pay 30 billion berry. But apart from this, Li Ang didn't do anything too outrageous to them, nor did he do anything to them. There seems to be some discrepancy with the rumored Li Ang, who alone could suppress the Navy, who could not raise his head. The Li Ang in front of him is not as domineering and terrifying as the rumors say. For a while, Robin's head was a little confused. Could it be that the Li Ang in front of him is a fake Li Ang? NLT, 42 and GT. Chapter 123 _ They are fighting. Li Ang stroked her white skin, and Nami blushed. She didn't look, and was embarrassed to see someone grabbing her little feet. This delicate little foot is afraid that it will cause some special lovers to go crazy. Li Ang's face was calm, and he said, "Be patient." Don't. Nami panicked for a while and said quickly. Click. With a move of both hands, Li Ang directly twisted Nami's ankle, and a crisp sound came out. Tilde. What followed was Nami's killing cry. By the time she reacted, she had found that the pain in her foot was not so much anymore. Hey, okay. Nami Mei said with a bit of surprise. Try walking on your own. Li Ang retracted his hands and smiled lightly. Yeah. Nami nodded, stood up from the sofa, bare feet, stood on the floor, and tried to walk a few steps by herself. As expected. The pain in the ankle has been greatly reduced. Although there is still some pain, it is no longer the heart-piercing pain before, and it can still be tolerated. Okay, two maids. Now, please start your work. Li Ang clapped his palms and smiled. Immediately, Nami, who had planned to thank her, curled her lips and said, I thought it would reduce the workload, but it's still so rigid. Come on, Nami. Robin showed a smile, and he didn't know whether it was because he was driven by Li Ang's character or other reasons. All in all, Li Ang is not as terrible as the rumors, so she doesn't need to worry too much. However, she did not know that the Li Ang she had seen was not the Li Ang in the eyes of the Navy. In the eyes of the Navy, Li Ang is an absolute monster. The tools for cleaning are at the entrance of the stairs, you can find them. Li Ang looked at the shadow of the two women leaving, his eyes twinkled, and reminded. Seeing the two women gradually disappear into the dim corridor, his expression gradually became more comfortable, and the corners of his mouth evoked a meaningful arc. Nice guy. Listening to Robin's inner voice, it seems that he is already considered a good person. A good man, yes, I am a good man. Li Ang smiled lightly and said to himself. Anyway, the two women couldn't escape from his palm. 3 days is enough to do a lot of things. He doesn't need to force him. When the time comes, the two girls will automatically and consciously do some shameful things with him. There's still plenty of time, and it's easy to deal with the two of them. However, the Straw Hats on the other side, I'm afraid, will meet Moonlight Moria soon. Li Ang's eyes fell into thought. What he cared about most was the swordsman Longma. I don't know if it will disappear here like the original. However, he didn't want to interfere with all this. The disappearance of Janao Longma was not because of his defeat, but because of his spiritual improvement. He stationed his spirit on the Black Saber Autumn Water before gradually disappearing. If he didn't want to disappear, with his current level of swordsmanship, Sauron couldn't beat him. In this way, Li Ang will also feel relieved. Chapter 123 _ They are fighting. NLT, 43 and GT. In this way, Li Ang will also feel relieved. Everything depends on the swordsman Longma's own choice, and Li Ang will not interfere. Under the cover of Li Ang's domineering look, he could clearly feel it. Robin and Nami were holding tools and cleaning everything in the castle. Under the terrifying pressure of Li Ang, the two women naturally did not dare to neglect. If the time spent here is increased because of neglect, it is the biggest problem for them. Hurry up and clean it up, there are still a lot of things to do next. Hope, Luffy and the others are safe and sound, don't worry about us. The two of us are relatively safe. With Li Ang here, our lives will never be in danger. Unless Liang wants to do something to us. Otherwise, no one dares to act rashly here. That's right, let's do it quickly, otherwise we'll have to stay here for the rest of our lives if time is added. Quote. The conversation between the two women did not escape Liang's ears. Although they were far apart, Liang's hearing was quite terrifying. You know, this is the ultimate hearing that has been systematically modified. Dong dong dong. The door was knocked. Liang looked at him, and the figure disappeared on the sofa. In the blink of an eye, he appeared at the gate and opened the gate directly. Immediately, the figure of Absalom appeared, panting and anxious, and said, "Sir, it's not good. We have welcomed outsiders here." "I know." Liang nodded casually and said. "Robinami is here, how could he not find the outsider? The Straw Hats must be in this terrifying bark. This is something he has already guessed thoroughly, and it is very clear without Absalom's reminder. You know." Absalom's tiger-headed face was a little dull, and he lost his voice. "I have also welcomed new guests here. How could I not know? So, you came to me, which means they have already met. Besides, the situation is very unfavorable for Moonlight Moria." Liang thought for a while and said, "Yes, my lord, they are fighting, and it seems that Lord Mariah has all his cards, and he can't help that Straw Hat boy. I'm afraid Lord Mariah will lose." Absalom said with a worried look on his face. "Defeat. That's not a bad thing for Moonlight Mariah. Is it, isn't it?" Liang said with a smile, "He is too confident. The appearance of the Straw Hats can just give him a wake-up call. If he continues to fall, he will soon be crushed by countless new pirates in the sea. In this case, it is better to inspire his own enthusiasm. If he doesn't try a defeat that makes him feel ashamed, he will always be self-deprecating. So much so that he ignored his strong heart from the beginning." After he finished speaking, Absalom was also stunned. After thinking for a long time, he nodded and said, "Sir, what you said seems to be reasonable." "Bullshit." Liang waved his hand and said calmly, "Let them fight to the bottom and clean up the mess in the end. Don't worry, this guy Moria won't die so easily. He will lose this battle. It's settled. What the Lord said is very true, but the loss of Lord Moria is too great. A group of shadows will be taken away and need to be reaccumulated." Absalom said with some regret. "It takes a long time to accumulate so many shadows. If it is taken away at once, I am afraid that Moonlight Moria can't hold back. It's good to have a longer memory, so as not to suffer more severe blows in the future." The corners of Liang's mouth moved slightly, and he smiled lightly. NLT 44 and GT. Chapter 124-Breath Shock. "You go back first, I'll wait and see the situation." Liang waved his hand and said, "Yes, my lord." Absalom left again with an anxious expression, and walked in a hurry. Although it was said that Moonlight Moria would not be killed, he was still a little worried. Soon, Absalom left the castle, and Liang closed the door and returned to the sofa. Seeing and hearing domineering spread. The image of Robin and Nami cleaning the castle seemed to come to mind. "It's quite diligent." The corner of Liang's mouth curled into an arc, holding a glass of red wine, smiled faintly. After he drank the red wine in his hand, he disappeared into the castle. Not far from the castle, in Moonlight Moria's territory, members of the Straw Hat Pirates were welcomed here. At this moment, the war is breaking out in 090. Moonlight Mariah's body is huge, and the power of the Devil Fruit is driven to the extreme. At the same time, Luffy and others are also vigilant against Moonlight Mariah. Under the blessing of many shadows, Luffy's whole body has grown several times larger than usual, and his strength has doubled. "The Straw Hat Boy, you must defeat him, our shadows are all in his hands." "Yes, we must defeat Moonlight Moria and take back our shadow. I hope the Straw Hats can succeed, come on." Quote. The spectators were full of excitement and excitement. They are all people who have been deprived of their shadows by Moonlight Moria, unable to escape from the magic triangle, let alone exposed to the sun. Shadow gathering place. Moonlight Moria absorbed the shadow crazily, grew his body, and stared at Luffy and the others with an angry face. Boom. The two collided, the aftermath hit everywhere, and the ground was shaken. You bastard, I must knock you out. Luffy's face was serious, he gritted his teeth, slammed into the front, and displayed his fruit ability. The scene was spectacular, and the fight was in full swing. Above the castle not far from here, Li Yang's figure appeared, and no one noticed at all. A person who appeared here was watching the battle with his eyes fixed on the front. Moonlight Moria is much weaker than it was back then. After being defeated by Kaido, he can't stand it, and his state will continue to weaken. Only by letting him truly understand his situation can he continue to become stronger. Otherwise, he will keep going backwards. Quote. The corners of Li Yang's mouth moved slightly, and he said flatly. Looking at the battlefield ahead, it has also entered the white hot. The battle between Luffy and Moonlight Moria was quite intense. Of course. In this way, the two are not strong or weak. With the help of some people who were deprived of their shadows, Luffy swallowed more and more shadows, and the level of terror was no less than that of Moonlight Moria. The number of shadows that ordinary people can insert is limited, but a person with a small and strong physique like Luffy can naturally insert more shadows to improve their strength. Luffy, Zoro, Sanji and others were cleaning up those zombie soldiers, looking at Luffy and shouting. Rubber rubber. Luffy's voice became rough, his face full of madness, his hands stretched like a rubber, and he slammed into Moonlight Moria's chest, machine gun. Boom, boom, boom. Chapter 124-Breath Shock. NLT, 45 and GT. Boom, boom, boom. Moonlight Moria quickly defended, but was suppressed by Luffy's terrifying offensive. If Luffy hadn't stuffed into the shadow, he wouldn't be Moonlight Moria's opponent. But when both sides are crammed into the shadows, it is unknown. Especially today's Moonlight Moria, there is still a trace of blood on the corner of his mouth. Although he was injured, it is not serious, but it will also affect the performance of his strength. This kind of battle is so boring. On the other side, Li Yang simply sat on the top of the castle, watching the outbreak of the battle, feeling dull. In his eyes, this is simply pediatrics. It's like, children who play in the house can't drive people's blood at all. Compared to the battle he fought in the G3 branch, it was far worse. It is not a level of existence at all. Huh. Li Yang's eyes flashed, and with a bit of surprise, he looked into the battlefield. Swordsman Ryoma and Zoro are fighting. At present, the swordsman Ryoma can still effectively suppress Zoro. In the original book, it seems that Zoro's defeat of the swordsman Ryoma did not happen. During this period of time, the swordsmanship of the swordsman Ryoma has improved rapidly. The tyrannical body, coupled with Brook's tyrannical swordsmanship, and having known Li Yang's perfect swordsmanship again, has raised his strength to a higher level. At this moment, Zoro is fighting with swordsman Ryoma with a face full of pressure. If nothing else, Zoro is no match for him at all. However, there are exceptions to everything. He is never a living person. Li Yang looked a little emotional. Even if the swordsman Ryoma looks like a person, he is still not alone. After all, he is something that exists as a zombie, not life. Call out. A sharp slash slashed the ground, and Zoro burst out with tyrannical strength, temporarily suppressing the swordsman Longma. It's just that the swordsman Longma didn't mess around, and his swordsmanship was still in order. One slash, IHE cut. Sauron held the word Hidao and waved a sharp slash. Longma was dissatisfied with his hands and feet, and Heidao Chu Shui exuded a gloomy and cold aura. The knife that Li Yang used was naturally contaminated with a bit of Li Yang's swordsmanship. This breath was a deadly deterrent to other swordsmen. Even Soren's mood became a little heavy, he took a deep breath and did not dare to act rashly. This breath was so terrifying, it was so overwhelming that he was almost out of breath. This knife has been used by a very powerful person. Moreover, this person is also a great swordsman with terrifying swordsmanship. I'm sure it must be like this. Zoro was secretly startled, thinking in his heart. Although this wisp of breath was very weak, the momentum contained in it made Sauron tremble a little bit, holding the hand with the word Hidao, shaking. Top of the castle. 5.7 Liang looked at Soren's changes, and laughed dumbly. It turns out that he is afraid of this knife. No wonder, the black knife Chu Shui has been used by me, and naturally it has my breath. My breath comes to Janao. Said, but a deadly deterrent. Even a wisp of breath can make Sauron dare not move. Such a Zoro, dare to challenge Liang. This is simply suicide. I'm afraid that when faced with Liang, who is holding a famous sword, Zoro can't even think of drawing out a weapon, and he has already lost before fighting. Young man, there is still a long way to go. Liang showed a smile, looked at Soren's anxious expression, and said with a smile. For a while, he forgot that, in fact, he was only in his early 20s, even younger than Zoro. But in the field of swordsmanship, he is recognized as number one in the world. NLT, 46 and GT. Chapter 125-Disappearing Ryoma. This sword was given to the Lord by me. Unfortunately, it seems that the Lord did not want to simply become a great swordsman, but chose to refuse. The swordsman Longma held the black sword Chushui, showing a bit of admiration and respect. Sir. Sauron was a little surprised and asked, who? Lord Liang. The swordsman Longma raised his head, his expression even more proud. Liang. Zoro's pupils shrank, and he lost his voice. You know him. Liang, who is called the New World's greatest swordsman, is naturally impossible not to know. Moreover, he still has a desire in his heart to challenge Liang. But now, he could only smile bitterly in his heart. He couldn't resist even that ray of breath, and he still wanted to challenge Liang. I'm afraid, this is his daydream. Stop talking nonsense. Today, if you defeat me, I will give you this knife. Janao Longma said in a firm tone. Give it to me. Zoro was stunned and asked, why? I saw the shadow of me on you. I really miss it. 28 I should never have existed. When I saw you, the thought in my heart became stronger. After all, I have been eliminated by the times. People. So, with the passing of time, I should also pass away. Seeing those new swordsmen who are constantly emerging, even I have to obey the old. Furthermore, Janao should be home to the world, but I can only shrink in this dim place. The trapped Janao is no longer Janao. Janao Longma's tone was inexplicable, with a bit of freedom. Above the castle. The corners of Liang's mouth moved slightly, looking at the dragon horse. The other party's words came from his ears, and he said with emotion, is this your choice? The original cannot be changed. Or, the existence of Ryoma itself has such an idea. However, because of Liang's appearance and his own uncontrollable physical actions, he never showed it. However, Ryoma himself is still very clear that he is out of touch with the times. He was just a product of the old era, and in the face of the new era, he felt confused and panicked. Want to stop him? The corner of Liang's mouth moved slightly, revealing an inexplicable look. He moved his footsteps, but after listening to Longma's firm tone, he retracted his footsteps, chose to wait and watch quietly, and said, how can you allow others to interfere with the path you choose? Ryoma's own choice. Liang will not interfere. Come on. Ryoma looked at Sauron, holding the black sword Chushui, with a terrifying sword energy on his body, kicked his feet, and quickly launched an attack. Boom, boom, boom. For a time, the two held on for no less than 10 rounds. The clash of swordsmanship produced bursts of fire, and the sharp sound was unbearable for the ears. The other side. The confrontation between Moonlight Mariah and Luffy is also coming to an end. The two fought fiercely, and there were countless scars on Moonlight Mariah's body, and Luffy didn't let it go. But if it is more than the Xiaoqiang attribute, naturally, Luffy will have more than 9 streets of Moonlight Mariah. Rubber rubber. Luffy pulled his hands apart like rubber, put them on his body, and shouted, "Machine gun!" Moonlight Moria punched out, forcibly forcing Luffy to retreat. Sanji and a group of shadow-strapped little guys are dealing with zombies. Hogbok was chased and beaten by Chopper, looking particularly embarrassed. Absalom joined the battlefield and entangled with Sanji, but his strength was still too weak compared to Sanji. Apart from transparency, he had no advantage. Where are Nami and Robin? Usopp looked around nervously. Chapter 125 Disappearing Dragon Horse. NLT, 47 and GT. Usopp looked around nervously. He seemed to be very idle here, and he did not encounter Perona like the original. At this moment, Perona, in Liang's castle, how could she meet Usobu? "Mr. Luffy, please defeat him," Brook said in a high tone. Only after defeating Moonlight Mariah can his shadow come back. This is the wish that he has been trying to accomplish for so many years, but has been unable to accomplish it. What a mess. Liang looked at the changes on the battlefield, his face was calm, and he said slowly. However, such a battlefield could not enter his discernment. "How's the situation on Ryoma?" Liang looked around and saw that the battle between Sauron and Ryoma was gradually coming to an end. Looking at it this way, Ryoma actually showed a disadvantage, and Sauron became more and more brave. "I chose it myself, I won't interfere, Ryoma, go all the way." The corner of Liang's mouth moved slightly, and said with a bit of emotion. He has been able to predict the result of Ryoma. It's just that this time it wasn't that Ryoma really lost the battle, but that he wanted to lose and find a way out, so he lost the most important thing a swordsman should have, the will to win. Without this heart, Ryoma's strength will not be so strong. On the contrary, Zoro's winning mentality made his swordsmanship play to the fullest. Finally. Puff. The dragon horse was beheaded by Zoro with a knife, a gap was opened in the chest, and the blue flame gradually burned his body. "I lost," Longma said in an inexplicable tone. The flames were burning, and Longma finally glanced at the black knife Chu Shui in his hand, feeling a little nostalgic. He seemed to feel something, looked at Liang on the castle, did not speak, bowed without hesitation, turned around, and his whole body was covered in blue flames. "This knife is for you." Ryoma threw the autumn water to Zoro, took a step, and gradually walked into the dim forest. At the same time, in the dim forest, a blue fire was shining brightly. Over time, the blue flare faded away. This also means that Ryoma has completely disappeared from this world. A worthy opponent. Sauron held the black sword Chushui, looked at the back of the swordsman Longma, and said solemnly. The terrifying sword chi emanating from Chu Shui made Sauron feel his heart palpitations to this day. Is this the saber used by the world's greatest swordsman? This sword chi is terrifying. Quote. At the same time. Because of the disappearance of swordsmen and horses, Brook's shadow also returned to his body, and said excitedly, "Finally, back. The battle on this side has just ended." The battle with Luffy also came to an end. The results were not unexpected. Moonlight Moria, defeated by Luffy's hands, was beaten so much that his shadow spit out, and fell to the ground, dying, unable to move. As long as the battle continues here, the end can be declared. The shadow peeled off by Moonlight Moria was also returned to everyone, making them excited and very excited. Our shadows have all returned. Moonlight Mariah lost the battle. This guy is finally defeated. We finally won. A group of people started drinking. Luffy fell to the ground too tired, showing a gratified smile. The battle is now over. And right now, a figure disappeared from the castle, appeared on the horizon in an instant, walked step by step, and gradually appeared in everyone's sight. NLT, 48 and GT. Chapter 126-Nightmare comes. When Luffy was lying on the ground, weak all over, still wearing a smile, said, "Luffy." Zoro, Sanji and others came one after another and laughed. There was a lot of excitement, and everyone got their own shadows, which made them particularly excited. "I won." Yusobu jumped up excitedly, his expression full of joy. Everyone is in a state of excitement. Only. At this time, a figure appeared in their eyes. Liang walked to Moonlight Moria step by step, and when he saw Moonlight Moria who had been knocked out, he couldn't help shaking his head and said, "It's too weak, and the strength needs to be improved." "You, who are you?" A pirate who entered here by mistake pointed at Liang and asked. As soon as they regained the shadow, their mood was self-evident. "Who am I?" Liang turned around, faced Luffy and the other group, and said with a faint smile, "This is a good question." You are." Sanji's face changed greatly, his lips trembled, and he was a little scared. Zoro took a half step back, holding the black knife Chushui, pointed at Liang, and said, "What do you want to do?" "You're pointing this knife at me. Have you asked its opinion?" Liang narrowed his eyes slightly and said meaningfully. "Well." Zoro seemed to have thought of something, and his pupils shrank. Is this knife connected to the person in front of you? In addition to the dragon horse just now, is there anyone else who can be related to this knife?" Liang. Suddenly, these two words appeared in Soren's heart, and he lost his voice. "You are that monster." "Who is it?" Luffy stood up, but he was obviously still a little tired, looked at Liang, rubbed his eyes, and asked. "Liang." Sanji's face was heavy and he said in a low voice. "What?" Everyone was shocked, their throats were dry, their eyes were fixed on Liang's body, and their whole body couldn't help shaking. Facing such a terrifying figure, their legs could not help shaking, and they almost collapsed on the ground. Yusobu took a half step back, looking terrified. "How did you draw such a monster?" He was just about to celebrate Luffy's victory. And now, nothing is in the mood. This is a more terrifying monster than Moonlight Moria. Some people are trapped here, unable to know the news from the outside world, so they ask, "Who is Liang?" Singly suppress the Navy headquarters. Brooke's tone became particularly heavy, said. "My God, one person suppressed the Navy headquarters. Really, is there such a terrible person in this world? Now, he is going to do something to us. Does he have something to do with Moonlight Moria when he appears here? In this way, we will all die here." No one would think that they could stand against a terrifying existence that could suppress the headquarters of the Navy. "Is it strong?" Luffy asked dumbly. "Strong, so powerful that all the enemies we face are not his enemies. Even Hawkeye has been defeated by him," Zoro explained with solemn eyes. Hearing this, Luffy is also a little nervous, and his current state is not very good. Just after the battle, the whole body was exhausted, and too many shadows were stuffed into it, and the side effects were quite obvious. At this moment, Chapter 126-Nightmare comes. NLT, 49 and GT. At this moment, in the public eye, Liang's face was calm, and he said, "You." The words have not been finished, and they have just fallen. A terrifying aura pervaded. Overlord is domineering. As if the substantive tyrannical domineering swept the audience, a terrifying aura filled the air and enveloped everyone. Ah! A group of people rolled their eyes, lost consciousness and fell to the ground, foaming at the mouth. What kind of witchcraft is this? Yusobu was startled, the pressure on his shoulders was very heavy, and even he felt that his consciousness was constantly weakening. Finally, Usopp also fell. In the scene, there are still Luffy, Zoro, Sanji, Brook and others struggling to support them, and they haven't fallen yet, but almost 99% of the people who fell. There are very few who are still awake. However, it is also very difficult for Luffy and others to insist on standing here. Li Yang's domineering arrogance brought them unprecedented pressure. This force was countless times stronger than any enemy they had ever seen before. What trick? Sanji gritted his teeth and held on. Zoro held two knives in both hands and stuck them on the ground, struggling to keep his consciousness awake. In terms of willpower, no one is stronger than Sauron. Not bad. The corners of Li Yang's mouth were slightly upturned, looking at Luffy and the others, taking back the domineering look of the overlord, and admiring it. Sanji and Zoro were very nervous, staring at Li Yang, for fear that the other party would suddenly make a move. Why are you so nervous? If I did it, you would be dead long ago, so how could you stay until now? The reason why you don't do it is because, your partner. Li Yang narrowed his eyes slightly and smiled. Who is the partner? Robin and Nami. Li Yang also intends to treat the two girls well, and he can't kill Luffy and the others. Diaresis, now, get out of here and get back to your ship. If I find out that you're still here, I'm really going to do it. Li Yang turned around and walked away step by step. Moonlight Mariah was left here by him, not taken away. Seeing Li Yang's back, Luffy and the others looked at each other, all heavy, and said, "Let's go, we are far from his opponents now. Wake them up and get out of here at once." Sanji said solemnly. But what about Robin and Nami? Luffy scratched his head and asked. Suddenly, Zoro was also stunned, unable to answer. Robin and Nami are in my castle, they owe me berry, and now, they are helping me with housework to repay. After 3 days, I will let them go. Before that, Li Nuo, no one can let them go. Li Yang's voice came faintly. Damn. Sanji gritted his teeth in exasperation and wanted to rush to rescue Robin and Nami. Don't be impulsive. Zoro stopped Sanji and said, if there is no accident, since he said that he will release him after 3 days, naturally he will not break his promise. At this moment, we just need to wait quietly. He will not tell Robin. How is it with Nami? Don't worry. But Sanji was still worried. Can you beat him? Zoro said with a heavy face. Sanji was speechless and silent. Defeat Li Yang. I'm afraid, before he got close, he was already killed by Li Yang. He himself is not confident enough to keep calm in front of Li Yang, let alone rescue Robin and Nami. Even if Li Yang doesn't let them go, what can they do? There is no way. The strength gap between the two sides is too great. Chapter 127 _ Did you ask my opinion? Soon. Although Luffy and the others were unwilling, they still chose to leave here with their partners. Under Li Yang's words, no one dared to resist. Suppressing the Navy headquarters with one's own strength, this record is terrifying. Sure. On the Wanli Sunshine, Frankie and others were already in place. Goodbye everyone, I'm leaving this hellish place. Many pirates waved goodbye to Luffy and others. Goodbye everyone. Luffy smiled, waved his hand, and shouted. Except that they need to wait here for Robin and Nami, the rest of the people can't wait to escape this nightmarish place as soon as possible. The originally prepared celebration banquet was directly disturbed because of Li Yang's appearance. Hey, there's someone there. Sanji raised his brows and said, looking at the dim environment in front of him. Who? Zoro looked around, and sure enough, he saw a huge figure. It seems that, wearing black clothes, wearing a small white hat, holding a book, and walking steadily, gradually walked into the horror bark. He seems to be 403. Sanji's face changed a bit, and he lost his voice, the one from Shichibukai, the bear Bartholomew. People from Chiwahai, what are you doing here? Zoro's pupils shrank, and he couldn't help asking. I don't know, but I think it's not a good thing for us. Sanji shook his head. Luffy, Brook, Chopper and others all looked at the scene ahead, speechless for a while. Well. Moonlight Moria gradually woke up, her head hurt a little, and then she recalled that she had been completely defeated by Luffy and others just now. I actually gave it to a little pirate and defeated it. Moonlight Moria sighed bitterly and said to himself, have I fallen? Or is the current sea no longer suitable for people of the old age like me? Being defeated by someone like Luffy who was just out of hair made him feel extremely uncomfortable. He still felt excusable after losing in Li Ang's hands. After all, Li Ang is a terrifying existence that even the naval headquarters cannot shake. But losing in the hands of Luffy and others can only prove that his own strength is too weak, and there is no other reason. Lord Mariah. Hogbag and Absalom walked out with some injuries on their bodies, said. You two, help me up. Moonlight Moria took a deep breath and calmed down, saying. Sudden. Moonlight Moria's movements stopped abruptly, with a trace of waves in his eyes, looking at a figure appearing in front of him, and whispered, what are you doing here? The people above ordered to get rid of some useless waste. Bartholomew's voice was flat, and he walked in front of Moonlight Moria step by step. Shibukai, Bartholomew Bear. The faces of Hogbak and Absalom changed dramatically, and they lost their voices. What is the other party doing here? To dispose of some useless waste. Who is this trash referring to? Trash. Moonlight Moria's eyelids twitched and her voice was hoarse. Those rice buckets gave you an order to get rid of me. His heart is very heavy, and now he is not in his prime. At this moment, he was attacked by the Bartholomew Bear, and if he met him, he would be killed in seconds. Chapter 127 _ Did you ask my opinion? NGT, page 1/2. Please click the next page to continue reading. NLT, 51 NGT. At this moment, he was attacked by the Bartholomew Bear, and if he met him, he would be killed in seconds. It was originally for me to choose. But in the end, you were actually defeated by the Straw Hats, which proves that you are no longer qualified to be in the position of Chiwahai. Bartholomew looked at Moonlight Moria and said lightly. Sure enough. Moonlight Moria's expression didn't show much turbulence. Her face was heavy, she said. So, where do you want to travel? Bartholomew took off his gloves, looked at Hogbak and Absalom, and said. I am Chiwahai. Moonlight Moria manipulated the shadow and attacked the Bartholomew Bear. CIDC, it's just that Bartholomew's speed was too fast. Teleportation appeared beside Moonlight Moria, shook his head and said, your strength is too weak. According to your level of strength, you will be taken from Chiwahai kicked it out, and it was forgivable. Quote. The Tyrant Bear, you are really a lackey of the Navy. What is it that makes you so loyal to the Navy? It's ridiculous. Moonlight Moria was not afraid and asked back. Lack. Bartholomew raised his head and looked at the sky, speechless for a while. The atmosphere has become a little depressing. You guys, where are you going to travel? Have you chosen a place? The Bartholomew Bear took a deep look at Hogbark and Absalom, and said. You. The two were frightened, and their expressions were full of fear. Faced with a Chiwahai, the two of them naturally did not have much courage. They also don't think that they have the strength to escape the palm of the opponent's palm. Don't you know that Li Ang is here? Moonlight Moria's expression remained unchanged, and she whispered. At the same time, he secretly brewed an attack, preparing for a sudden attack. Li Ang. Bartholomew's face changed a little, and said, what does he have to do with me here? I want to do something to you, will he come to stop it? I can't tell. Moonlight Moria gave a sharp laugh and said mysteriously. Let's send you guys out of here. After the task is completed, I still have something to do to visit the son of the old friend. Bartholomew slowly stretched out the palm of his hand, about to touch Hogbag at the same time. Suddenly, a voice followed. Who brought you here, Tyrant Bear? Have you asked my opinion? After this sentence appeared, the whole place fell silent. The expressions of Hogbak and Absalom changed from panic to excitement, and they hurriedly looked at the source of the voice. As expected, they saw Li Ang's figure, walking step by step with a smile. Lord Li Ang. The two shouted in unison, excitedly. Bear, how are you going to end it? Moonlight Moria's eyes flickered, narrowed slightly, and said. It's really Li Ang. Bartholomew turned his head and looked at Li Ang's figure walking step by step. His expression gradually became dignified, and he did not dare to act rashly. It's been less than a week since he played against Li Ang. Moreover, he witnessed with his own eyes the scene of Li Ang suppressing the Navy headquarters alone. Nature. He will not be arrogant enough to think that he can compete with Li Ang, and it is already a very remarkable move that he can leave here alive. When he met Li Ang, it was reasonable that his mission failed. Li Ang's face was calm, and in the end, he stayed 5 meters in front of the Bartholomew bear. He glanced at the Bartholomew bear and asked with a smile, I'm covering this site, don't you know? Or, the people above you don't know, they are coming to test me. Do something against me. NLT, 52 and GT. Chapter 128 _ Surprise the Tyrant Bear, please customize it. Lord Li Ang. Moonlight Moria laughed and cried, took a half step back, looked at Li Ang, and said. He was defeated by the pirate group, which made him a little embarrassed to face Li Ang. Li Ang. Bartholomew's face was heavy, staring at Li Ang, daring not to do anything out of the ordinary. Moonlight Moria _ covered by Li Ang. Thinking of this, his heart became heavier. I'm afraid that this task will not be completed. Who can kill someone in front of Li Ang? Even if he is a Chihuahua, he can't do it. Did the 5 old stars send you here? The corners of Li Ang's mouth moved slightly, walked in front of Bartholomew Bear, and asked lightly. His height can only reach the position on the left and right of the opponent's shoulders, but the breadth of his body makes Bartholomew unable to move. A terrifying aura oppressed the Bartholomew Bear. Big man. Absalom and Hogback had weak legs and said in a low voice. Sorry, almost forgot you two. Li Ang laughed and said, the domineering arrogance on his body gradually subsided. If his overlord appearance continues, I am afraid that both of them are about to be crushed to death by him. After the overlord color converges. Hogback and Absalom exhaled heavily, wiped the cold sweat from their foreheads, and thereafter Li Ang became stronger in their hearts. Just relying on aura alone can oppress the two of them to such a degree, what a terrifying strength. Today's mission is going to fail. Bartholomew took a deep breath and calmed down, secretly said. Answer me, it's hard for me. Li Ang narrowed his eyes slightly, looking at the Bartholomew Bear, said. Yes. Bartholomew nodded without denying it. The person who ordered him to come here, except the 5 old stars, is no one else. Are they here to test me? If that's the case, then I'll have to make a trip to Holy Mary Joa. The corners of Li Ang's mouth were slightly raised, and he smiled lightly. If the 5 old stars really came to test him, then he wouldn't mind logging into Mary Joa himself, so that the 5 old stars and the others would understand that he was not easy to mess with. Right. There is also a supreme being named I Am. The king of the Draconians, the master of the Void Throne, dwells in the deepest part of the Holy Land Mary Joa. Even the 5 old stars have to bow down to him. I Am. The expression on Li Ang's face became particularly exciting. The identity of this person was a mystery. Moreover, how many years this person has lived is also a mystery. After all, it is not known whether it was one of the 20 kings from 800 years ago. Longevity. Here, longevity is possible. It's not a bad thing to see you if you have the chance. The corners of Li Ang's mouth moved slightly, and he whispered to himself, his eyes twinkling brightly. As for the master of the so-called Void Throne, the king of the dragon people, these identities, he did not care very much. All in all, no matter how terrifying the identity of the person, in front of him with modifiers, he is just a blank sheet of paper, pale and powerless. No, you misunderstood. I didn't come to test you. I won't overthink myself and think I have the strength and qualifications to test you. Bartholomew shook his head and said a little heavy. Chapter 128-Frightening the Tyrant Bear. Please customize it. Bartholomew shook his head and said a little heavy. After seeing Liang's strength, he naturally did not test Liang's confidence. Come to test Liang. Unless he was impatient with his own life, originally, the purpose of his coming here was just for Moonlight Maria, not including Liang. He also didn't expect to meet Liang head-on. It's not to test me, it's a little boring. Liang waved his hand a little boringly and said. If the 5 old stars attacked him, he wouldn't mind logging on to Mary Joa, and he could even make a fuss about Mary Joa and force out the so-called king of the Tianlong people. Hearing this, Bartholomew's lips moved slightly, but he didn't say anything. He was afraid of saying something that would cause Liang to be impulsive to the point of direct action. After not confirming Liang's idea, it is the best way not to speak. Moreover, Liang is completely unpredictable. Forget it, let's go, don't disturb my purity. Liang waved his hand, glanced at the Bartholomew bear, and said. He still thinks about the opponent's action, then he can effectively fight back. Unfortunately, this bear, it seems, is too spineless. Don't even have the courage to do it. Thinking of this, Liang shook his head with a dull expression on his face. However, Bartholomew's approach is also reasonable. In the face of an enemy that is countless times stronger than himself, rushing to do it is just a meaningless move to ruin his own life. Well. Liang looked at the still indifferent Bartholomew bear and said with a smile, don't want to leave. If you don't want to leave, I don't mind playing 2 games with you. Farewell. Bartholomew immediately turned around, his face was heavy, and he used teleportation to disappear from Liang's sight. Today, the mission was declared a failure. Moonlight Moria was under the protection of Liang, and he had to tell the 5 old stars truthfully and let the other party make a decision. If Liang is involved, then this matter is very serious. If Liang is not involved, Moonlight Moria is the target of slaughter, but if Liang is involved, then you have to take a long-term plan. 0. It can be said that under the protection of Liang, basically, no one can do anything to Moonlight Moria. Thank you, my lord. Moonlight Moria breathed a sigh of relief, looked at the back of Bartholomew's departure, looked at Liang, and said with a respectful expression. As a neighbor, no matter what, I can't watch you let him take it away. However, it's time to hone your strength. Today's affairs, keep it firmly in your heart. Liang glanced at Moonlight Moria and said lightly, if you don't think about making progress, you will still be killed by others in the future. Only when you become stronger is the truth. What the Lord said is very true, and I will reflect on it carefully. Moonlight Moria nodded solemnly, her face dignified. This time, it really hit him hard. It turned out that his own self-confidence strength was already so vulnerable in the sea. You don't get stronger, others get stronger. Go out to sea, I hope, you can overcome the nightmare in your heart. Liang said with a smile, the figure gradually disappeared, coming and going without a trace. There were still 3 Moonlight Morias left, with extremely bitter expressions. Moria-sama, don't be discouraged. Hogbok and Absalom looked at Moonlight Moria and said solemnly. Don't worry, I won't fall again. Moonlight Moria raised her head, looking at the dim mist, her face was firm, and she already had a plan in her heart. This battle gave him a major turning point. From today onwards, he must reset his mentality and work hard to restore his strength at the peak of that year. Chapter 129 _ It's useless even if you scream. Horror bark. Sure. On the Wanli sunshine, Luffy and the others frowned and kept talking. Are we just watching Robin and Nami fall into the devil's hands? Sanji said with a worried look on his face. Sauron thought calmly and said, otherwise, what do you say? If it is a head-to-head fight, even if all of us die here, we may not be able to save them from Liang's hands. His strength, presumably it should be very clear in my heart. How can a person who can overwhelm the Navy be an ordinary person? With just his momentum, it is impossible for us to defeat him. Since he said let people go, it is impossible to deceive us. Frankie looked at the surrounding fog and whispered. The only way out is to wait. Still not strong enough. Zero Sanchi. Luffy clenched his fists. His face was full of struggle and pain. His partner was caught, and he couldn't do anything. He didn't want to experience it again. Luffy, take a rest first. Chopper looked at Luffy with some worry and said. Just after the battle with Moonlight Mariah, Luffy's body was quite weak. At this moment, after the violent ups and downs of emotions, I am afraid that there will be serious sequelae. Sudden. Well. Zoro shrank his pupils and saw a huge figure who appeared behind Luffy, shouting, Who is it? Come out to me. Tread, tread, tread. Footsteps sounded. Sanji, Frankie, Brook and other talents realized it later, and looked at the position behind them in horror. I don't know when, here, a burly figure appeared, wearing black clothes with bear's paw prints, holding a book, and his face was expressionless. Bartholomew Bears. Sanji's face changed drastically and he lost his voice. Looking at his gloomy face, he should have met that monster and returned without success. Zoro's eyes flickered, holding the word Hidao, and he was very vigilant. Who are you talking about? Luffy turned his head blankly, and saw the appearance of the Bartholomew Bear, frowned, and asked, Who are you, this guy? How did you appear on the boat? I'm here to test you. Bartholomew's voice was as flat as ever. At the same time, he slowly loosened the gloves on his hands, and the corners of his mouth moved slightly. My mission has already failed. If I can catch you guys, it can be regarded as making up for my failure. At least, the people above won't blame it. So, now, how are you going to stop my arrest? Straw Hat Boy, Luffy. Bartholomew looked meaningfully at Luffy, Zoro, and the others, and said. Dragon's son, Hope, don't let me down too. Also, this group of friends, don't let me down. Otherwise, I will really arrest you. Bartholomew thought to himself, his eyes gradually became cold, and his body exuded a terrifying aura. ... Inside the castle. Crunch. Liang pushed open the stone gate, and the corner of his mouth curled up as he walked into the castle. At the same time, a crisp and pleasant voice came from his ear. Robin, let's take the opportunity to escape. He shouldn't pay attention to us now. Chapter 129 _ It's useless even if you scream, please customize it. Robin, let's take the opportunity to escape. He shouldn't pay attention to us now. Let's calm down, we only need to stay here for 3 days. If he escapes, he will continue to increase the time. The longer we have to be here, the more the gain is worth the loss. But do we really have to obey him? At the moment, there is only this way. As for escape, the idea is different. His ability is very terrifying. Otherwise, with only one person, let the Navy bow, how could the world government forgive him? His strength is quite terrifying. ... It's still Robin smart, if it's a silly woman like Nami. I feel like he'll even be caught by me a dozen times, and then be trapped for a year and a half. A smile appeared on Liang's face, thinking to himself. If it wasn't for Robin, Nami might have escaped. But even if Nami escaped, she couldn't escape from his palm. If Nami ran away, it was also a picture he was very happy to see. In this way, he has more reasons to let Nami use him as a maid for the warm quilt. At that time, even if you do some indescribable shameful things, it will come naturally. If Ruo Nami moved Robin and the two escaped together, then it's my fault. The corners of Liang's mouth moved slightly, and he smiled lightly. Immediately, he walked to the living room, on the sofa, quietly waiting for the return of the two women. About half an hour later, Perona floated over and said, Sir, dinner is ready. I see, I'll be there in a minute. Liang nodded with a smile, watching Perona leave. There was a sound of footsteps in the direction of the gate. Robin and Nami walked in a little tired and saw Li Ang at first sight. Robin's face was calm and unmoved. Nami was a little panicked and said, "I have a good job. I don't know who it is. He has been instigating Robin to escape. But if you really want to escape, my door is open. You can escape, of course, the consequences of being caught by me are very serious." Quote. Li Ang stood up, walked to Nami's side, approached her crystal-clear little ears, and blew. Immediately, Nami's pretty face turned crimson. She quickly took a half step back. Yu-hung was up and down, and even her body actually reacted a little, which made her a little embarrassed. "You, don't mess around, I'm calling someone." Nami's flustered hands were in front of her, her slender legs swayed, and her pure whiteness made people feel sorry for her, and her flustered expression could even arouse a man's blood. "Call someone," Li Ang said with a smile, "even if you scream, no one will come to save you." You. Nami's body trembled, unable to speak. "Lord Li Ang, don't scare her anymore, she's going to pee her pants 1.8 because of you." Robin took a deep breath and said flatly. "Forget it, I won't scare you. You are so timid, how can you be a pirate? Like you, if it wasn't for your luck all the time, I'm afraid you would have been buried in the sea long ago." Li Ang touched Nami's smooth orange hair and chuckled. I. Nami froze for a while, not daring to move. It's better for Robin to be presentable, that's how a pirate looks like. Li Ang turned his eyes to Robin, who suddenly became nervous. In the face of Li Ang, no matter how calm Robin is, it is impossible to completely maintain a calm state of mind. "By the way, there is one more thing that you two need to do." Li Ang rubbed Robin's straight long hair again, opened his eyes slightly, and felt the softness of his hands, and his mood became very happy. Chapter 130-No Adults. Please speak. Robin was shy and stiff in place, his delicate face gradually turned a little rosy. Being contacted by a man up close, her mood was naturally very turbulent. Although she has a much better mentality than Nami, she is also unavoidably shy. "Forget it, you two go to dinner with me first." Li Ang's face was calm, he withdrew his palm, feeling the softness disappearing in his hands, which made him feel a little reluctant to part, smiled and looked at the two girls, said, "Yeah." Robin nodded slightly and said. Nami lowered her head, her pretty face still rosy, looking at her little white feet. She followed Robin's side, and the two gradually left the living room. Looking at the backs of the two women, Li Ang smiled unabated. "It's perfect." Robin and Nami, at this time stage. Undoubtedly, Robin's charm is even greater. However, Nami still has room to grow, and she will be on par with Robin in the future. However, Nami is now more youthful and energetic. Although her figure is not fully developed, it has begun to take shape, which is completely different from those airports. 28. In 3 days, get them both done. The corners of Li Ang's mouth moved slightly, and he smiled lightly, having some plans in his heart. He doesn't like being forced. He wanted the two girls willingly. Hee. During the dinner, Li Ang gave Perona a brief introduction, and the three girls had a preliminary contact. In this regard, Perona did not contradict, but introduced a lot of things to the two girls enthusiastically. Of course, the topic is often revolved around Li Ang. Immediately, Li Ang could not wait to give Perona a fierce kiss, so as to instill the concept into the two women. I am afraid that his chances of attacking will be higher. The first time we met, I thought Lord Li Ang was an ordinary person. At that time, I frightened him. But I didn't expect that the next time, the Lord showed a little strength, and we were all intimidated. And, then, your Lord gave a gauntlet to the Navy headquarters, and I was in a very uneasy mood at the time. In the end, your Lord's strength was monstrous, and we won. Quote. So strong. Robin took a deep breath, and his delicate face was amazed. She glanced at Li Ang silently from the corner of her eye. Her pretty face was a little crimson, and it was difficult to fade away. Have to admit. A man like Li Ang is too good. Nami seems to be a little intoxicated, unable to extricate herself, indulging in Li Ang's terrifying record, and feeling extremely admiration for what Li Ang has done. I tell you, it's more than that. Your lord is still very kind to people. Perona's pretty face showed a sweet smile and continued to speak. Li Ang left in the middle, leaving the three daughters chatting chatteringly. Seeing the three girls getting along, Li Ang felt a little relieved, and his chances of attacking Robin and Nami had almost doubled. As long as Nami and Robin get to know Li Ang, they will find that they are trapped in Li Ang's whirlpool and cannot find a way out. Little Perona, after 3 days, I will have to take good care of you. You have helped me a lot. This time, the two of them already have a preliminary impression of me. The following things will unfold very easily. Li Ang was sitting on the sofa, and he could still hear the conversation of the three women, with a smile on his face. Night falls. Here in the Dread Bark, night is not much different from day. But the law of time still has to be calculated according to the outside world. It's just that, here, at night, there will be zombies. These zombies also more or less died in the battle with the Straw Hats. After that battle, Moonlight Mariah retreated to practice, and no longer studied those meaningless things as before. Even if there is a huge army of zombies, it will no longer bring him any sense of security. Fortunately, with Li Ang by his side, Moonlight Moria won't worry about being attacked by others. At this time, inside Leon's castle, Robin and Nami were working hard all day and were going to the room that Perona had arranged for them both. Chapter 130-No Adults, and GT, page 1/2. Please click the next page to continue reading. Robin and Nami were working hard all day and were going to the room that Perona had arranged for them both. Wait a minute. Li Ang's figure appeared in front of the two women and smiled. Ah! Nami was frightened. She couldn't help but take a half step back. Her pretty face turned pale. She looked at Li Ang, and said, "Why, you walk without a sound." "It's normal, I'm exercising your vigilance. Looking at it now, it's very good. Your vigilance is very good. Keep it up. I'm here. I have something to help you deal with," Li Ang said with a smile. "What's the matter?" Robin couldn't help asking, and there was some suspicion on his delicate face. Is there anything else the other party needs her help with? If Li Ang can't do it himself, it's even more impossible for them to do it. Come with me and I'll tell you later on the way. Li Ang moved in his footsteps and walked over. Robin and Nami looked at each other, not knowing why, but relatively speaking, their vigilance against Li Ang had gradually decreased. After all, if Li Ang really wants to do something to them, there is no need to be so troublesome. Even if he really wants to do something to them, they have absolutely no ability to resist. But Li Ang got along with each other during the day, and he behaved very normally, and he was also very talented, which made them subconsciously choose to believe Li Ang's words. At this moment, Li Ang turned his head, looked at the two women who were still standing still, and said with a smile, "Don't worry, I won't eat you again. Just come with me, don't linger." Yeah. Nami and Robin followed closely behind. But in the middle of it, Li Ang didn't make any sound, which made the two girls feel even more weird. Likewise, they didn't suspect that Li Ang would be bad for them. Just like a rich man with tens of billions of bellies, will he take a fancy to the assets of an ordinary person who is worth 100,000 bells? Is this possible? Go in. Finally, Li Ang stopped, looked at the two girls with a smile, and said, "Where is this place?" Nami was a little puzzled, and glanced strangely in front of her. "This is a room, 407, and it's a very luxurious room. The huge castle, the most luxurious room she has ever seen, is here." "My room." The corners of Li Ang's mouth twitched slightly, and he smiled. Huh. Nami's eyes widened, round and round. She stepped back subconsciously, and lost her voice. Why did you bring us to your room? Is it? Is he going to do that to people? If so, should people resist? Nami's whole body trembled, but she didn't dare to act rashly. At this time, even Robin was a little nervous. The corners of his mouth moved slightly, but he didn't say anything, feeling uneasy. Her beautiful eyes kept looking around, trying to get rid of these thoughts in her heart as much as possible. But in the current situation, it's hard for her not to think about that. Otherwise, what can the other party bring them to his room? If you really want that, do you want to resist? Robin's head was confused, his beautiful eyes kept turning, his little heart was pounding, his blood was rising, his head was about to smoke, and the ruddy reached the base of his ears. Those white as jade ears are almost turning into rubies. Do what? Seeing Nami's nervous expression, Liang said in a wicked way, of course, I ate you. Huh? Nami's whole body stiffened, she was completely terrified, her pretty face turned pale. Sir, don't, I'm really good at doing things, don't eat me. Chapter 131-140 Call. Robin breathed a sigh of relief, all right. After hearing Liang's words, she was not as nervous as before. Nami, sir, he's joking, don't take it seriously. Robin tried his best to comfort Nami with words that comforted himself, said. I just said, how can you eat people? Nami smiled shyly, looked at Liang timidly, and said. However, the world is full of wonders, and she is not sure that there will be no people who break through in this world. Help me go in and clean up the room, and also, put my quilt and other things in order. If you are tired, you should take a proper rest. Liang pointed to the messy items in the room and said. Although Perona often organizes, it will still be messy. In this regard, Liang was too lazy to tidy up, so he made the room messy at will. Good. Nami and Robin nodded lightly, 080, and walked into the room. Then, Liang's figure disappeared from the sight of the two women. Are you gone? Nami looked back timidly. After not seeing Liang, she exhaled heavily and said, fortunately, I was almost scared to death by him. Nami, when he said eating, he didn't really want to eat people, but he wanted to eat you all over. Robin's beautiful eyes flashed, leaning against Nami's ear, and said with a smile. Ba ba ba. Nami looked at Robin angrily with a blushing face, and held the quilt in both hands to tidy up, and said, hurry up and do things, and when he comes back and sees us chatting here, what if you give us more time? Do. Yes yes yes. Robin crossed his hands, narrowed his eyes slightly, and used the power of devil fruit to tidy up the room. Robin, your abilities are so handy. Nami said with an envious expression on her face. Robin just smiled and didn't answer. After half an hour, Liang returned to the house. Sure enough, he saw the whole house, and some books on the table had been turned over, and the corners of his mouth could not help twitching. Going to take the bait slowly. Liang's mouth moved slightly and smiled. Fishing, come step by step. There are many things that can't be rushed. Worrying will not only have no effect, on the contrary, it will make the original opportunities disappear in the palm of your hand. The next 2 days, Robin and Nami were very diligent. Whenever Liang called, the two girls would complete it very efficiently and meticulously. This makes Liang unable to pick out any faults. Moreover, the relationship between the two women and Perona is getting better and better. After all, the Straw Hats were still too afraid of Liang's strength. During this period of time, they did not enter the terrorist bark without authorization, nor did they plan to find Liang. This day, there was still half a day left before Nami and Robin left. After half a day, the two women can repay the high compensation of 30 billion berry. The location of the stairwell. Robin and Nami showed a comfortable smile and talked. I can finally get out of here. Although it felt gloomy when I first came here, but now I look at it, it is quite friendly. Moreover, that Liang is not as hateful as the rumors say, although he often scare me. Who made you so timid, Nami? Nonsense, Robin, you were in the bathroom yesterday, knowing that Li Ang would pass by. You actually opened the door on purpose, and deliberately showed him all. You. I didn't, I really forgot to close the door. But then again, Nami, you're no exception, your feet are obviously better, you still pretend not to be, and ask Li Ang every day to ask him to rub it for you, but it's true it is the envy of others. Quote. As the two women talked, their pretty faces gradually turned crimson, and they were extremely shy. He's quite charming. Chapter 131-done. And GT, page 1/2. Please click the next page to continue reading. He's quite charming. Nami blushed slightly and whispered. After the past few days of contact, they seemed to have taken poison, and their affection for Li Ang became stronger and stronger. Not to mention Nami, even Robin has a feeling of being cared for. This feeling, even she could not resist. So, what Nami said about her being seen by Li Ang in the bathroom was actually opened on purpose by herself. Whenever he thinks of this, Robin's pretty face turns blood red and his head smokes. But, even so, when they can leave, they will still leave here. It's just that I feel a little reluctant, or some other thoughts. You too. Li Ang's figure appeared strangely behind the two women, said. Ah. Nami was frightened, but she quickly recovered and said angrily, can't you make some noise? The fright she has been receiving this time has made her somewhat immune. How about come to my room and talk about life? The corners of Li Ang's mouth were slightly raised, his eyes twinkling, looking at the two women, said. The time is ripe. Now, just waiting for the flowers to bear fruit. It was cleaned up only yesterday, but since you've spoken up, we're definitely going. Robin, don't you think? Nami looked at Robin, blushing a bit, and said. Yeah. Robin was a little shy, and nodded. So smooth. It was Li Ang's turn to be surprised, and glanced at the two women strangely. When he saw the blurred eyes of the two women, he was a little surprised. It turns out. It's like this. Inside the castle, in a room. Two exquisite works of art are presented in Li Ang's eyes. And, more attractive than what I saw last time. Why? This time, the exquisite artworks also have ruddy colors, which are obviously more moving. White and red, like a statue, the skin is crystal clear, making people linger. Nami and Robin looked at Li Ang, and on their delicate faces, they did not dare to face Li Ang. Their eyes flickered, looking around, not daring to look directly. The corners of Li Ang's mouth were slightly upturned, with a smile. He took out a plate of fruit. Nami and Robin were a little timid and picked up the bananas on the fruit plate. The two women were very shy, and their beautiful eyes were shining. After all, it's still embarrassing for two people to eat a banana, 0.0, but they still do. Then, Li Ang picked up the apple on the fruit plate with both hands. Obviously, the apples near Robin's side are bigger, while the apples on Nami's side are still growing, but they feel quite good. There was also a small grape on the apple. Li Ang bit the grape gently and sipped it. The taste is not bad, with an aroma. Finally, Li Ang picked up the fruit plate and prepared to mix the fruit salad together. Two bright red watermelons appeared in his sight, with a bit of pink. A banana is paired with two watermelons. The bright red watermelon is complete. Pick up a spoon and stir it on the watermelon. After it is combined with the banana, the tomato juice is bright red and dazzling. Li Ang hovered over the watermelon with a spoon. Both watermelons were overflowing with bright red tomato juice and obvious perforations appeared. The watermelon was overflowing and the smell filled the room. Chapter 132-injured. The time of night flies by. The next day. Magic Triangle. The fog was shrouded in fog, and it was still a big night environment. You can't tell the difference between people at close range. Inside the castle. Robin and Nami gradually woke up, opened their eyes slightly, and saw the familiar figure in front of them, looking at them with a smile. Good morning. The corners of Li Ang's mouth twitched slightly, and he smiled. Good morning. Nami and Robin showed a shy smile and said. When the two girls were just getting ready, the piercing pain almost made them cry. Nami panicked. It hurts more than others say. Is it my problem? Don't panic. Liang rubbed Nami's hair with a smile and said with a smile, it's my problem, it's just that I've been too long. Hearing this, Robin's pretty face turned red with a swish, and when he recalled the picture from last night, his mood was a little fluttering, and he disappeared. Really? With the two women together, Liang was still in high spirits, without any sense of fatigue at all. Instead, the two of them were exhausted. So it is. Nami Song sighed, but seemed to think of something. Her pretty face blushed, and she didn't dare to face Liang. You two, you have enough time to go to see. Liang rubbed the pretty faces of Robin and Nami and said. I don't even want to leave. Nami smiled and said. After the intimate contact, the relationship between Liang and the two women naturally increased dramatically in an instant. Okay, Nami, it's time for us to go. Robin took a deep look at Liang, with many complicated expressions in his eyes, said. Come on too, I don't want to stop you from chasing your dreams. Liang embraced the two women, hugging the slender waist, and said. Yeah. The two women nodded lightly, their eyes becoming firm. They are not vases. In Liang's sight, Nami and Robin said goodbye to Perona after preparation, and gradually left in Liang's sight. But only halfway there. The two women, Nami and Robin, turned their heads sharply, rushed towards Liang's position, and hugged Liang. Their beautiful eyes were a little red, and tears could not help shedding. I'll find you, don't worry. Liang patted the backs of the two girls and comforted them. Definitely. The two women sobbed a little, said. They finally left and embarked on their own journey. It's just that they gave Liang the most important part of their bodies. Except for Liang, they could no longer accommodate anyone else. The crew is about friendship, not camaraderie. Liang's figure left a deep impression in the hearts of the two women, an impression that no one can replace. Looking at the back of the two women leaving, Liang's face was calm, and he smiled strangely. The walking posture is not quite right, could it be that I am too good? After speaking, Liang chuckled and returned to the castle. However, in his ear, there was also the voice of two women talking in the distance. Lord Liang is really amazing, I don't know how many times. Nami, it's a shame you can say such things. Robin, you lasted longer than me yesterday, don't you think I didn't know? And, I'm sure, you did more than me. Nonsense, I didn't, that is, 14 times. Quote. The Two Goblins. Chapter 132-injured. And GT, page 1/2. Please click the next page to continue reading. The Two Goblins. Standing by the window of the castle, Liang couldn't help laughing. The other side. Perona came gradually. She was wearing a princess costume, showing her long legs as white as jade, and wearing black princess shoes, floating in the air. Her delicate face was a little rosy, and said, Sir, am I not as good as them? Of course not. Liang's eyes flickered, and a burst of blood rushed to his forehead, rushing towards Perona. ... Horror bark, sure. The Wanli Sunshine stayed here. On board. It's been 3 days. Zoro frowned, and there were dark wounds left by the Bartholomew bear on his body. He took a deep breath and said in a deep voice. Robin, Nami. Luffy's face was also very heavy, but his injuries were fully recovered and he looked alive. There must be nothing wrong. Sanji looked ahead, saw two figures walking gradually, and lost his voice. They're back, that monster, as expected. Robin, Nami. Chopper waved his hand and shouted excitedly. You are finally back. Frankie and Brooke also smiled and said. Everyone, we're back. Robin and Nami smiled, but their smiles were mixed with other emotions, and they glanced back at the dim environment behind them. After watching for a long time, in the end, the two women gradually boarded the Wanli Sunshine. Just because the exercise last night was too intense. Robin and Nami were also a little slow when they boarded the boat, but few people noticed that they were excited and basically ignored these things. Nami glanced at Robin, her pretty face was a little rosy. It seems that she is asking Robin, how is it there? Robin responded with a reluctant smile. Immediately, Nami understood that the situation of the two was the same. We're tired, let's rest first. Nami looked at everyone, smiled and said. Immediately, she pulled Robin into the room. Sail. Luffy stood at the bow of the boat excitedly and shouted. Received. Frankie nodded, steering the 750 rudder. The Wanli Sunshine gradually sailed out to sea and left this area. Only Chopper, who was in the corner, scratched his head in confusion, and said to himself, just now, Nami and Robin were walking in a wrong way. Could it be that they were injured? Seeing them walking, it seemed like they were walking. It's exhausting. However, these words, it did not say. After all, if it was an injury, Robin and Nami should be looking for it. But the two women didn't look for it. Come to think of it, it shouldn't be a serious injury. Thinking of this, Chopper breathed a sigh of relief, and once again showed a simple smile. Since everyone is fine, that's fine. As long as Robin and Nami are back, that's enough. It didn't know that Robin and Nami were indeed injured, and they were not so badly injured that they were bleeding. However, Robin and Nami won't tell these things, they both know about it, that's fine. Finally leaving this hellish place. Luffy looked at the terrifying bark and exhaled heavily, saying. Seeing Liang's terrifying strength made him even more shadowy about this place. If possible, don't come here again in the future. Lest they encounter Liang, it will be a nightmare for all of them. Of course. Now, it's not a nightmare for all of them. After all, Robin and Nami still want to see Liang very much. Chapter 133_Mariah's Request. Magic Triangle. Here, back to the original appearance. The original quiet environment has not changed much, and it is still as peaceful as ever. Because of Liang's existence, many pirate navies dare not step into this sea area, and even warships with generals in charge are even more afraid. Just like the Magic Triangle has become a restricted area in the hearts of many people. Horror Bark, inside the castle. Liang was sitting on the sofa with the lovely and charming Perona on her big lap. After she became a woman from a girl, Perona's figure has obviously grown a lot. Although not as mature as Robin, she is still slightly better than Nami. Dong dong dong. The door was knocked. After Perona opened the door, she saw Moonlight Moria and others. Morlia. Perona was a little surprised and couldn't help but ask, why are you all here? Let's find Lord Liang. Hogbuck cast an envious look. It was his dream to be able to do errands here in Liang. Not to mention Liang's terrifying strength, he can convince Hogbuck himself with pure medical skills. Moonlight Moria. On the sofa, Liang looked at the door, saw Moonlight Moria and the other three, and asked with a smile, what's the matter? Sir. Moonlight Moria came to Liang, a little restrained, and tentatively said, this time, there is indeed one thing, and I want you to agree to it. But it doesn't matter. Liang smiled, not paying too much attention, said. Originally, he owed Moonlight Moria a promise. Now is the time to keep the promise. As long as the requirements are not excessive, Liang will complete it for Moonlight Moria. Among them, including killing the 4 Emperor Kaido, there is no problem. He knew that Kaido and Moonlight Moria had a deep hatred. If Moonlight Moria asked Liang to kill the 4 emperors, this promise could be fulfilled. But now, what Liang doesn't know is what exactly is Moonlight Moria going to do. My lord, I'm working on a study that requires a lot of materials. You know, I haven't been in contact with the outside world for years here diaresis. Furthermore, people from outside won't help me, so I want you to help me find these materials. Moonlight Moria took a deep breath and said, "My promise, to do this. It's a surprise to me." Li Ang's eyes flickered and he said with a smile, "Don't you want me to help you kill the 4 Emperor Kaido? My promise can be fulfilled." Huh. Moonlight Moria was stunned, her eyes hesitated for a moment, and she fell into contemplation. Li Ang didn't urge him either, summoned Perona, stroked the other party's soft pink hair, smelled the direction emanating from the other party's body, and smiled unabated. He is not in a hurry, as long as Moonlight Moria promises, as long as he can do it, he will naturally try his best to satisfy it. Of course. He is not omnipotent, and he also has some things he doesn't want to do. For example, if he were to destroy the world government. Now he can't do this for the time being, and he is helpless. Even if it could be done, it would be quite troublesome. Li Ang didn't want to do such a troublesome thing yet. "Sir." Moonlight Moria thought for a moment, took a deep breath, and replied, "My request does not need to be changed, please help me prepare these materials. As for Kaido, one day, I will fight him with my own hands." Chapter 133_Moria's request, please customize it. Moonlight Moria thought for a moment, took a deep breath, and replied, "My request does not need to be changed, please help me prepare these materials. As for Kaido, one day, I will fight him with my own hands." The words are full of confidence. Li Ang smiled unabated. "You have finally regained your confidence back then. It seems that you are about to get rid of the fear that Kaido brought you." "Sir, how did you know?" Moonlight Moria wanted to ask a long time ago. "How did I know that?" Li Ang smiled and said meaningfully, "There is nothing in this world that I don't know. Do you believe me when I say this?" "I believe it." Moonlight Moria nodded solemnly and said. There were too many miracles in Li Ang, and he had to believe it. Before, if he met Li Ang, would he think that Li Ang could compete with the 3 generals? Impossible. Even if someone in this world could do it, it would be the 4 emperors, not a nobody like Li Ang. In addition, Li Ang also forced the Navy headquarters to bow their heads. This kind of thing was something that Moonlight Moria never dared to imagine before. However, Li Ang has done all these things, which can be called incredible things. Well then, you list the materials you want, and I'll find someone for you. Li Ang looked at Moonlight Moria and said bluntly. Since he doesn't need to do it, he will save a lot of trouble. Kaido is in the New World. If he wants to kill Kaido, he has to cross the Red Earth continent and go to the New World to find the trace of Kaido. In this way, the time spent before and after is simply impossible to achieve without more than half a month. Diaresis, sir, please take a look. Moonlight Moria hurriedly handed Li Ang the list of materials that had already been stored. Weapons. Drugs. Li Ang was a little surprised. Looking at the above, he looked at Moonlight Moria and asked, "Are you going to go to war? Are you going to prepare these things?" "My lord, I'm ready to go to sea," Moonlight Moria said in a serious tone. The dread bark was impossible to sail anymore. In this case, he will rebuild a pirate ship, and prepare a lot of weapons, medicines, etc., and sail again. So it is. Li Ang suddenly realized and said, "Well, I will prepare these things for you. It will probably take time, I have to ask professional people." "Sir, who are you looking for?" Moonlight Moria was a little curious. He knew that Li Ang basically stayed at home. But who is going to prepare these things for Zhao Hao? This is something one has to wonder about. Navy headquarters. Li Ang whispered to himself, then shook his head and laughed. "I just destroyed a branch, I'm going to go to them now, I'm afraid they won't take things seriously for me. Moreover, they may not be willing to help me, not with me. I'd be fine if I went to war." Naval headquarters, this option can be erased. Pirates. This is also not realistic. Unless, it is the use of high-priced berry for the acquisition. But if you want to prepare so many materials at the same time, few pirates can prepare it. It's troublesome to piece things together, and this is not what Li Ang wants to see. It is more efficient to find someone to take charge. Who to look for? Suddenly, Li Ang's eyes flickered, revealing a meaningful smile, and said, I think of someone. I think he should be very interested. Chapter 134 Go to see again. Who? Absalom was a little unclear, so he asked. Li Ang doesn't have any big heirs, so Absalom and others, although they are under pressure when facing Li Ang, are not the ones who dare not speak. Both are one of the 7 Cs. The unruly person appeared in Li Ang's head and smiled. Could it be? Moonlight Moria's pupils shrank, a little surprised. If it is that person, I am afraid, he is a little afraid. Both are Chihuahai, but everyone's strength is still divided into high and low. At the top of the Chihuahai ranking, probably the same group of people as Hawkeye and Hancock. Among them, a person cannot be ignored, has a very high sense of existence, and always has a mentality of wanting to pick things up, which is daunting. That's him. Li Ang nodded with a smile and said. Lord Mariah, who is he? Absalom asked. Doflamingo. Moonlight Moria's face became heavy, said. If he were to face Doflamingo, he himself would not be sure to kill him. It's just that the other party seems to have cooperated with Kaido. My lord, he seems. Moonlight Moria hesitated. I know. 077. Li Ang nodded and said, transactions do not distinguish between the types of people. As long as there are interests, there will be transactions. He will not ask other things. Kaido, not his only customer. My lord, I understand. What's more, I'm a little guy. I'm afraid, Kaido, this guy, has long forgotten me. However, I can't forget him. Moonlight Moria laughed at himself. He didn't think he could make Kaido remember him for so long. After the war that year, Kaido should have left him behind. Also, I didn't propose to cooperate with me, but he proposed. Come to think of it, even if he refuses to cooperate with Kaido, he will not refuse to cooperate with me. Li Ang is quite confident in his own energy. Sir. Moonlight Moria's mouth moved slightly, and she was speechless for a while. But he also had to admit it. Really. It is more tempting to cooperate with Li Ang than to cooperate with Kaido. What Kaido can't do, Li Ang can do. That's the difference between the two. He should be in Dressrosa in the New World at the moment. However, there is his branch in the Chambord Islands. You can go to the Chambord Islands and find someone to contact him. AIAF. Li Ang's eyes flickered, he thought for a moment, and said. My lord, I'm not in a hurry. Moonlight Moria lowered her head and said quickly. After living here for a long time, people are getting rusty. It's a good thing to go out for a walk. I'll set off tomorrow. Li Ang looked at Moonlight Moria and said. Thank you, sir. Moonlight Moria thanked him and led Absalom and Hogbark to leave gradually. He was very emotional at the moment. No one could understand his mood. The people of the old era are finally going to see again. Seeing the departure of Moonlight Moria, Li Ang sighed slightly and said with a smile, the sea, after all, is a place with infinite charm that attracts countless people. Even the old people of the old era are still willing to go out to sea for adventure. Sir, it's a smooth journey. Perona smiled and said. She respects Li Ang's decision at all times, and will not be a drag. She will wait for Li Ang's return here in the castle, prepare dinner, and do her part. Tonight, come to my room and talk about life. Li Ang leaned against Perona's ear and smiled. Yeah. Chapter 134 Going to see again. Yeah. Perona was almost weak, grabbing Li Ang's arm with both hands, blushing, and nodded. The next day. Li Ang stepped on the raft, looked at Perona on the shore, and waved with a smile. Sir, be careful along the way. Perona floated in the air, her beautiful eyes were a little red, she said. Gradually. It was not until Liang disappeared from her sight that she turned around and gradually left. If it weren't for her being able to float in the air, I'm afraid it would be very difficult for her to walk. Thinking of this, Perona's pretty face blushed a little. Last night, I was crazy all night, and I didn't realize it until morning. Now, she still hasn't recovered. Fortunately, she doesn't have to walk with her feet on the ground, otherwise it will be a shame. It would be nice to be able to have a baby for the grown-up. The more she thought about it, the more she blushed. She quickly left here. Front. The magic triangle is surrounded by fog, making it impossible to tell the sense of direction. A raft, floating on the sea. Liang stood on the raft, looking at the scene that was gradually becoming brighter in front of him. The corners of his mouth curled slightly. The Chambord archipelago is prosperous on the surface and rotten on the back. However, what does this have to do with me? There, too, find ways to contact Doflamingo. However, there are other ways to let Liang contact Doflamingo in the shortest time and find the Navy headquarters. But Liang had never been to the Chambord Islands, so he had to go to C&C, so he dropped by to contact Brother Doflamingo. I heard that in the Chambord Islands, the frequency of Tianlong people is quite high. Also, there is a population auction. These are all very new things to Liang, and it is not a waste to come to this world for a natural experience. The magic triangle is not very far from the Chambord Islands, but it can't be said to be very close. For ordinary voyages, 3 days are also required. Coincidentally, while Liang was floating on the raft, he could enjoy the scenery along the way, which is why he did not directly use the moon step to reach the Chambord Islands at the most terrifying speed. Don't just focus on goals. The scenery of Yuantu may be more beautiful. As for the so-called Tianlong people, Liang didn't care. If he provokes him, he will kill them together. He will not be soft on disposing of these wastes. As for whether it will attract a general, could it be that in the future, he will be afraid? Do not make jokes. Liang would be even happier if he could attract the general. Because, in this case, there is a battle to be fought. However, I am afraid that at that time, the general did not dare to do anything to Liang, so he could only return to the Navy headquarters in despair. Whoa! The sea splashed and moved with the wind. The blue sky is full of clouds. By the way, in the Chambord Islands, there is One Piece's Deputy Captain Rayleigh. Liang's eyes flashed, and with a smile, he muttered to himself. When you think about it, it seems the Chambord Islands are quite lively. It's fun. There are a lot of mixed people when it is lively. I like to join in the fun the most. Liang's mouth moved slightly, thinking to himself. There is a vast sea, and the ocean currents are endless and turbulent. On the sea, a raft, drifting with the current, gradually disappeared. Chapter 135_Chambord Islands. Chambord Islands. District 44. Merchants and pirates can blatantly land here. Of course. There are still a lot of naval forces in the Chambord Islands. Moreover, the overall strength of this batch of navies is also quite impressive. In the face of a chaotic place like the Chambord archipelago, the military quality of the navy must be relatively improved. Otherwise, it is impossible to face the unexpected situation that happened here. Come on, give me a hand. A middle-aged man carrying a box of goods, Lang smiled. The civilian landing area is in Area 44. The huge Chambord archipelago is divided into countless regions. There is also the area where the number 16 area is not released, and even the Navy dare not easily enter the area. People unload here. By the way, have you heard about it? It happened a while ago. A young man was a little excited, moved the goods, and asked. What? Everyone asked questions. Liang. The young man's eyes flashed with deep admiration and said, the thing that the Navy bowed his head. Cut. Everyone sneered and said with a sneer, what did I think it was? It turned out to be this. It's still something that children already know. Your news is too ill-informed, and you only know it now. No, I just imagined it. If you say that when a monster like Liang meets a Tianlong person, what kind of picture will it be? The young man lowered his head and whispered. When it comes to Tianlong people, the people around them change their expressions and look around nervously. Stop talking about these things. That's right, I don't want to die yet. A group of people quickly left. Tianlong people, these 3 words are taboo. A few days ago, a civilian was killed. These Tianlong people are so abominable. Old head Li, are you dying? Dare to say these things. I am sorry everyone, we'll take our leave first. Quote. The young man looked at the faces of everyone, sighed, shook his head and said, the fear has gone deep into the bones. Are Tianlong people really so arrogant? Could it be that no one can rectify them? Perhaps, in this world, only those monsters in the new world dare. Some people said silently. Liang, dare. The young people firmly believe that the worship of Liang is like a surging river. Unfortunately, Liang is not a pirate. It seems that the collision with the Tianlong people is unlikely to happen. Huh. Suddenly, someone looked at the sea in front of them, his eyes flickered, and he lost his voice. It seems that there is a raft floating over. Who is so daring to use a raft to drift on the sea? Even with a large sailboat, sailing at sea can be risky. Not to mention, a mere raft. As soon as there are some big waves, the raft will be knocked off immediately. In this way, the person standing on the raft will naturally be submerged in the bottom of the sea and die. Really or not? The crowd watched, and sure enough, they all saw a raft. Their eyes widened, and they lost their voices. Actually, does anyone really dare to ride a raft alone and drift on the sea? I thought it was a rumor. This person seems a little familiar. The young man just now said in a low voice. Don't say it, I also feel that this person seems to have seen it somewhere. Although there is only an ambiguous appearance, it is very familiar. What the hell, do you feel this way too? I thought I was the only one. Hey, I feel it too. Quote. A group of people were moved and a little surprised. If only one person feels familiar, that's understandable. But if everyone feels familiar, it can only be said that the person in front has a problem. Who is he? The people were puzzled. The raft gradually approaches the edge of the coast. Chapter 135-Chambord Islands. The raft gradually approaches the edge of the coast. Come on. A young man lost his voice and looked at the raft in front of him with all his attention. At the same time, everyone concentrated on it, wanting to see the face of the figure on the raft without blinking. Unfortunately, suddenly, the people on the raft disappeared. In their line of sight, hundreds of pairs of eyes stared at them, but they still couldn't see that the people on the raft. How could they disappear? No trace was taken away, and there was no sign of it. Until they come back to their senses. I saw that there was only one raft floating on the sea, and even a trace of human existence could not be captured. What about people? An old man rubbed his eyes. If not so many people saw it, he thought it was his own dazzling. A good-looking person, unexpectedly, disappeared out of thin air. This person is terrible. Some wise people were secretly shocked and said. Not an illusion. Because too many people here have seen it, if it's an illusion, it doesn't make sense at all. Moreover, how big of an illusion can cover the hundreds of people here? There is only one possibility. This person, using extremely terrifying speed, disappeared from their sight. In fact, this person has already logged in ashore. It's just because the speed is so fast that they can't notice it at all. I'm going. Is it a human or a ghost? This is too scary. If you don't have it, it will be gone. Does he really exist? What I saw just now was not an illusion. It's okay for one person to have an illusion. With so many people, it will never be an illusion. It's just one person, but he disappeared. His speed was so fast that we couldn't find his shadow at all. The Chambord archipelago feels more and more chaotic. The number of pirates who have come here recently is increasing. Moreover, there are also a group of supernovas. Quote. A few days ago, supernovas landed on the Chambord Islands. Today, there are no fewer than 5 supernova pirates gathered in the Chambord Islands. This is quite scary. The pirates collectively plunged into the Chambord Islands, leaving the Navy too busy to take care of them. At this moment, the Chambord Islands are already in chaos. And at this moment, there is such a terrifying figure, and naturally, it will make the already chaotic Chambord archipelago even more chaotic. Chaos has always been the essence of Chambord. No one can make the Chambord Islands neat and tidy. Because this is the only way for pirates to go to the New World. There is another one that flew over the holy land of Red Earth, Mary Joa. But this is almost impossible. Therefore, most of the people who come to the Chambord Islands are preparing to enter the New World. The other side. 16 of the Chambord Islands. This is the place known as the no-fat zone. You can see it everywhere. Pirates burn and plunder. This kind of picture is not uncommon. At this time, Li Ang's figure gradually solidified. Because the speed is too fast, there is still a little afterimage. His sudden appearance did not disturb the people around him. Feeling the lively atmosphere of the Chambord archipelago, his eyes narrowed slightly, feeling a little nostalgic. Living in the dim environment of the terror bark for a long time is almost unsuitable for such a lively place. If you want to find Doflamingo, you should go to the population auction house number 1 and find the person in charge there before you can contact him. Li Ang's face was calm and he whispered to himself. When he was about to take a step, the movement stopped abruptly, his eyes narrowed slightly, and his face was a little interested. Behind him came a frantic voice. Boy, leave the things on your body with me, uncle. Chapter 136_ I'm just asking for directions. A middle-aged man in gray clothes gradually came from behind Li Ang. He was carrying several pistols and a knife on his waist was very conspicuous. His expression was rebellious and his eyes were like eagles. Looking at Li Ang's eyes, as if looking at a prey, he grinned. Today is so lucky, a novice like this is too rare in this area. But I didn't expect it to happen to me once. Li Ang's expression and demeanor, in his opinion, was a novice who couldn't be more novice. He doesn't mind giving a good education to this kind of newbie. At this time, Li Ang stopped, turned his head, looked at the middle-aged man, and said, "It's a coincidence, I also want to find someone to show me the way. Do you know where the population auction house in Area 1 is going?" Well, the middle-aged man looked a little surprised, staring at Li Ang suspiciously. Could it be a fool? In this 933 situation, actually indifferent. Could it be that he is really a novice in his heart and completely unaware of his intentions? Thinking of this, the smile on his face became even brighter, and said, "Of course there is no problem. Population auction house, right? I can take you there, and I can also take you in myself. What do you think? Look at this guy's face. If it is auctioned to the auction house, it should be worth a lot of money. Some noble ladies like to keep some young and strong guys in captivity." Immediately, the middle-aged man's mood was a little excited, holding a gun in his right hand, and said with a smile, "First hand over everything on your body to me. Then, I will take you to the population auction house. Don't make me difficult, do it. Otherwise, my gun will go off. I'm just here to ask for directions." Li Ang's mouth moved slightly, shook his head helplessly and said, "Why, there are always people who think about you who have no brains and think that I am easy to bully. Don't you really know who I am?" It stands to reason that his reward list has spread all over the sea. It's basically impossible that no one doesn't know him. But the middle-aged pirate in front of him seems to have completely failed to recognize his identity. Otherwise, the middle-aged pirate would only have 10 courage, and would not dare to be arrogant and domineering in front of him. "I don't care who you are. Don't you think you are a great person? In other words, your family is very rich. In this way, it is better to let your family pay the ransom for you. Bar. The middle-aged man showed his yellow teeth, and his smile seemed particularly excited. Rich people are even more perfect. In this way, there will naturally be more berry that can be harvested. Did not expect. I just came out for a walk, and I came across such a good business. This luck, there is simply no one. The middle-aged man was in a surging mood, his excitement was hard to hide, and he moved closer to Liang who was in front of him. He smiled and said, "In the future, when you go out, you have to protect yourself. I can kill 100 of a little guy like you." 100. Liang's mouth moved slightly and smiled, "Can you kill me 100? Are you serious? It always feels like things are getting more and more interesting." This pirate really didn't recognize his identity. Rather, play with each other. Anyway, there is no hurry to find Doflamingo. Boy, it looks like I'm going to give you a long memory. I'll take a detour after seeing my uncle. No, that's wrong, you have no future. Unless you ask your family to bring the ransom. The middle-aged man walked to the area less than 3 meters in front of Liang, and laughed wildly. Kidnapping, traffickers. Liang looked at the middle-aged man and asked with a smile. Aren't you afraid? The middle-aged man frowned slightly and said. I always feel that something is not quite right. If the person in front of him is a novice, it would be too calm. Chapter 136 I'm just asking for directions. If the person in front of him is a novice, it would be too calm. Faced with this situation, most people are afraid that they will be scared to death. But the young man in front of him was different. Instead, he watched what happened with great interest. Are you not a novice? But that doesn't make sense either. He had never seen Liang's name or Liang's face from anywhere. It is undeniable that his news is very blocked. If it wasn't for the news jam, he couldn't have seen Liang's reward list. What's your name? The middle-aged man frowned and asked. To be cautious, it is best to ask, so as not to provoke a killing god for yourself. But this hairy boy can't see any old hands. It's good to be careful. With this mentality, the middle-aged man spoke again tentatively. If you don't want to die, leave all your valuables to me. I'll spare you for being magnanimous. Life. Come on, let me see, how did you get around me? Liang waved his hand and said with a smile on his face. I don't know whether to live or die. The middle-aged man held a gun, aimed at Liang's left foot, and said viciously, when I take you to the population auction, you will know that the most terrible thing in this world is not death, but life is better than death. After speaking, his eyes narrowed slightly, and he pointed the gun at Liang's left foot, ready to pull the trigger. Have you made up your mind? The smile on Liang's face did not diminish, and he said lightly. You don't want to live anymore, boy, then go to die. The middle-aged man's face showed a bit of grimness, he roared, and pulled the trigger. Boom. As soon as the gunshot rang out, the loud voice echoed around. A bullet pierces the air. Liang's expression remained unchanged, and he slowly stretched out 2 fingers. His speed is countless times faster than the speed of a bullet. Almost only an afterimage could be seen. The next moment, Liang's hands, covered with a layer of armed color, touched the bullet and easily clamped the bullet. The time spent in the whole process is only in an instant. Silence. Liang took a bullet between his index finger and the middle, looked at the middle-aged man, and said with a smile, I'm just asking for directions, why do you always have to hit the muzzle yourself? 3.3 Immediately, Liang threw the bullet aside, his face was calm, and he looked at the middle-aged man quietly. At this moment, the middle-aged man came back to his senses, his face paled in shock, his lips trembling. When he saw Liang holding the bullet at that moment, he already knew. This thing is a big deal. I thought it was a sheep, but who knew it was actually a ferocious tiger? You. The middle-aged man stepped back step by step, his eyes filled with a strong sense of fear. His right hand holding the pistol was already weak, almost falling to the ground, and the corners of his mouth were trembling. Over the years, he had never seen someone as terrifying as Li Ang. I thought that with my own eyesight, I could leave the Chambord Islands after a few years. But in the end, he was clumsy and failed to recognize Li Ang's terrifying strength, which caused the tragic desperate situation today. Chapter 137-Trafalgar Law. Please customize. Don't kill me, don't kill me. The middle-aged man looked at Li Ang with fear, and begged. Take me to the population auction in Area 1. Quote. Li Ang walked to the middle-aged man and said lightly. Sir, don't kill me, I'll take you there. The middle-aged man nodded quickly, the fear in his heart could not subside. 2 fingers caught the bullet. This made him dare to compete with Li Ang, it was simply too terrifying. This is the strongest one among the enemies he has met over the years. But, why is the whole person silent? Is it because he is ignorant? The middle-aged man thought so in his heart, his face changed for a while, and he lowered his head, not daring to say a word. You want to run away? Li Ang looked at the middle-aged man with a half-smile, and said. The extreme domineering of seeing and hearing is not a joke. It is achievable to be able to hear everything that a middle-aged person has in mind. No, no, my lord, I don't. The middle-aged man's pupils shrank, denied it, and hurriedly explained, I don't dare to escape, my lord, I really didn't think so. Thinking is just thinking, there is no need to deny it. 28 Li Ang patted the middle-aged man on the shoulder and said meaningfully, I didn't blame you, right? Lying is not a good thing. Besides, I personally dislike people who lie the most. My lord, I. The middle-aged man was unable to speak for a while and was about to cry. He could feel it, if he still insisted on saying he didn't want to run away. I always felt that Li Ang would really kill him. But for him to admit it, he was afraid that Li Ang would still kill him. Lead the way, I'm very friendly, don't worry. Li Ang's mouth moved slightly and smiled. Sir, the population auction market is not far ahead, I'll take you there. The middle-aged man took a deep breath and said quickly. Immediately, he walked ahead, looking at Li Ang with some trepidation, trembling all over his body, and the fear dominated by Li Ang's strength could not be concealed. Don't be too nervous, it will be bad if you go the wrong way. Li Ang narrowed his eyes slightly and said with a smile, I won't eat you. At most, I'll cut you off for 18 pieces. It's better to die than life. You should be very excited to feel it once. Thump. Middle-aged man's legs were weak, he slumped on the ground, and said in horror, my lord, I was wrong, don't kill me. Sir, don't kill me. The middle-aged man knelt on the ground and kept kowtow. Many pirates around looked at this scene with great interest. This kind of scene is not uncommon here. There will always be people who will admit to their cowardice and beg for forgiveness. But what surprised them was that the man kneeling on the ground was actually their old acquaintance, Hackerly. The notorious Hackerly actually knelt down and begged for mercy from such a young man. This picture is a bit weird. Still planted, I said, his method is unreliable. At this moment, he finally hit an iron plate, want to live. It's difficult. Wait, why does this person seem familiar to me? It's like, where have I seen him? What the hell, you feel that too, I feel the same way. Quote. Many pirates were a little confused, and they looked at Li Ang and the middle-aged Halleck, and whispered. Halleck completely disregarded his face, kowtowed and begged for mercy. Sir, I would like to be a bull and a horse for you, please spare my life, I don't want to die. I have an 80-year-old mother and a 3-year-old daughter. Can't die yet. When you kill others, they also have old mothers and daughters' relatives. But, have you let them go? What's more, I really don't like other people lying. Your lies are too easy to see through, very boring, you know. Chapter 137 Law. Please customize. When you kill others, they also have old mothers and daughters relatives. But, have you let them go? What's more, I really don't like other people lying. Your lies are too easy to see through, very boring, you know. Li Ang's face was calm, he patted Ha Like's forehead, and said. I. Harkley's lips moved slightly, unable to speak. His hands were stained with blood, and there were 80 without 100. These people also have families, wives and children. But in the end, he still killed him without mercy. Take me to the auction, maybe, I will think about it, maybe I will spare your life. Li Ang's face was calm and continued. Yes, my lord. Harkley nodded quickly and led Li Ang away gradually. Leaving the group behind, they were looking at the backs of Li Ang and the other two and started talking. Blood hunter Harkley with a bounty of 4 million, his bones are so soft. The people he met were too strong, so strong that he didn't dare to resist. Who is that young man? It feels so familiar. Quote. In the crowd. A group takes root implicitly in the crowd, and no one notices their presence. It was formed by more than a dozen people, one of them was burly, 5,003 thick, very rough. One was actually a Pandaren, wearing orange clothes, with a naive look, looking around nervously, as if he was not suited to speaking in a crowd with so many people. The man in the middle wears a furry winter hat with leopard spots. He has distinctive black bags under the eyes, 2 small gold earrings on each ear, a mustache on the chin, and is wearing a casual long-sleeved shirt with a hood. The pants are light blue with a speckled pattern. The black sleeves and hat are matched with pink and orange clothes. There is a special pattern of a large smiling face on the chest, and the back of the hand. The back of the hand and the elbow are also tattooed with black tattoos similar to those on the clothes. Anyone who pays attention to the bounty list here will find it. 077 This group of people is the Red Heart Pirates. First, of course, is Trafalgaro. Captain, that man looks familiar. Panda Bebo's eyes twinkled and asked in a low voice. I feel it too. The burly and strong man Chiangbalu nodded his head, always feeling that that appearance, where have he seen it, and it is still quite impressive. But for a while, they still couldn't remember. Not in person, but in this portrait somewhere. The Chambord Islands, it's going to be a mess. I didn't expect that such a terrifying monster would be attracted. We have to be careful and don't be too ostentatious. With the existence of this monster, let alone us, even if the Navy is in the future, they have to stay safe and dare not act rashly. However, what is he doing here? Luo's eyes were very dignified and he said in a low voice. Captain, you say, he's the one. Chiangbalu's pupils shrank and he lost his voice. Think of this. He sucked in a breath of cold air, his mood was surging, it was difficult to suppress, and his whole body trembled uncontrollably. When he thought that the terrifying monster was actually in the Chambord archipelago, he felt a sense of fear in his heart. Who? The people asked. One man overpowers the Navy, Li Ang. Luo was expressionless, very serious, the corners of his mouth moved slightly, and said. Chapter 138_Population Auction. Li Ang. Those 2 words made everyone present dare not say a word, falling into a dead silence. Pandaren Bebo was a little scared and said, is it the legendary Li Ang? He actually came to the Chambord archipelago. What is his purpose? To sink the Chambord archipelago. Even the naval branch fortress was sunk. What else is it that makes the other party afraid? What people thought was impossible, Li Ang did. This makes people have to think, there is really nothing in the world that can make Li Ang dare not do it. Even if it is related to the Tianlong people, it is not a problem. I don't know, but I don't think I would attack the Chambord archipelago for no reason. This way, it's not good for him, and the existence of the Chambord archipelago is too meaningful. Luo took a deep breath and thought, of course, the way of thinking of monsters is beyond our imagination. Besides, we have no way to stop the monster's every move. Indeed. The crowd nodded. They couldn't stop what Li Ang wanted to do. If that's the case, it's better not to think about it. Anyway, there is nothing I can do. Let's go to the population auction and have a look. It is said that many pirates have come here, and most of them are pirates that are also supernovas with us. Luo's eyes shone brightly and said bluntly. ... Population auction. Direction of the gate. Under the leadership of Hackerly, Li Ang gradually entered the number 1 area. On the way, the pirates encountered did not take the initiative to provoke Li Ang. Come to think of it, Hackerly is still somewhat famous, which can make some pirates have scruples. However, it was precisely because of this that the lives of these pirates were saved. What will happen if they provoke Li Ang? Nature speaks for itself. Sir, it's just ahead. Harkley pointed timidly ahead and whispered. This way. His heart almost jumped out. God knows if his own fears have already overwhelmed him. Standing by Li Ang's side makes him feel an oppressive force that exists all the time. After taking Li Ang to the auction, his mood became even more terrified. Will he die? Will this lord spare him? Thought here. Hackley's lips trembled, his legs were weak, he knelt on the ground, wept, and hurriedly said, My lord, I was wrong, I shouldn't have done anything to you, just forgive me once. Heard. Li Ang turned his eyes to Hackerly, his face was calm, and he was so domineering. I won't let him off, this damn fellow. You dare to make me kneel, wait. Although I can't beat you, someone can always kill you. I don't believe that you can leave the Chambord Islands alive. Very familiar, who is he? No matter, after I leave alive, it will be his death. ... Harkley's face was covered with tears, but what he was thinking was completely different from what he saw on the surface. Even though he was shocked by Li Ang's strength. But the dog can't stop eating shit, and he still retains his aspirational thoughts and mentality. Pirates are pirates. Li Ang raised his head, looked at the blue sky, and sighed with emotion. After being a pirate for so many years, how can you lose that ruthless energy? My lord, me. Harkley's mouth moved slightly, his head kowtowed, and he was about to speak. Just this moment. Chapter 138-Population Auction. Just this moment. Li Ang glanced at Hackerly and said lightly, You can leave now. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Harkley's expression became excited, he quickly stood up, and lost his voice. He was about to leave, but Li Ang shook his head and said, I told you to leave, not to let you leave in front of me. Instead, to let you leave this world. Ah! Harkley's throat was dry and he wanted to speak. Puff! A fist pierced his chest, revealing a huge blood hole, and blood spurted out. With a thump, Hackerly's eyes turned white, and his whole body fell to the ground, gradually chilling and losing his vitality. Li Ang shook the blood on his fist, his face was calm and unmoved. It's just killing a person, and it can't affect his mood at all. Glancing at the corpse on the ground, Li Ang walked into the population auction in front of him with an expressionless face. At the location of the gate, the two guards witnessed the scene of Li Ang killing Hackerly, and there was not much fluctuation in their expressions. It is still common for such people to kill people here, and it cannot attract their attention at all. However, looking at Harkley's face, they always felt a little familiar. Isn't it, Harkley, that rogue pirate? Has he been killed? He deserves it. It is a great blessing for such a person to live for a few years. The two guards whispered. And soon. Li Ang walked to the gate, looked at the two guards, and said directly, Take me to the person in charge of your auction house. Huh? Two guards were stunned and asked, You, who are you? My name is Li Ang. The corner of Li Ang's mouth moved slightly, without concealing it, and said, Diaresis, this time, I came to him and asked him for Doflamingo's contact information. Then, talked to him about a cooperation thing. If not as I expected, this auction house belongs to Doflamingo, right? How do you know? Two guards were a little wary and said suspiciously, you said, you are Liang. Stop joking. Liang, that's a real big man, a big man who even dared to do something in the Navy headquarters. How could it be you? Because the Navy headquarters revoked the reward list, many people also forgot about Liang's appearance. You only need to report. The rest is not within your jurisdiction. Liang said again. Okay then, Lord Liang, right. Just wait. A guard pondered for a moment, did not dare to act rashly, and nodded. Whether it's true or false, he must be on guard. Reporting to the person in charge above is the best way for him. He didn't want to provoke the enemy for no reason like those stunned greens. In this case, even if he had tens of thousands of lives, he would have already died here. Du's Zhao, you wait here and don't do anything else. I'll be back in 3 minutes, and until then, just do your best. The guard warned the other companion, worried that there would be some mistakes, and after a while, he left quickly. 3 minutes later. In Liang's sight, the guard returned. Beside him, there stood a chubby middle-aged man with a big belly, dressed gorgeously, with golden ornaments on his body, like a nouveau riche. The middle-aged man looked at Liang with a professional smile. Although his heart was full of doubts, he did not dare to be careless. At least, if the person in front of you is identified correctly. This kind of terrifying existence is far from what he can provoke. Even if there is no such identity, as long as the person in front of him can really reach a cooperative relationship with Doflamingo, his identity will be higher than him. Think of this. Middle-aged man looked at Liang and said cautiously, Master Liang. I'm the person in charge here, Disco. Chapter 139 _ The Docile Clown. I don't know if it's true or not, but Disco still has to show his courtesy. What if, is it true? A terrifying figure like Liang came here. Doflamingo also had to be welcomed in person, let alone the head of an area in his disco district. After all, this is to suppress the terrifying monsters in the naval headquarters by oneself. At the same time, in the underground world, Liang also has a very feared title. The Son of Heaven. The meaning of the Son of God. This means that the people in the underground world are so afraid and envious of Liang. To be able to achieve such terrifying strength and record at such an age is not the Son of God. What is that? Disco, isn't it? Liang glanced at the disco, then looked at the corpse behind him, and said lightly, let your subordinates deal with the corpse first, and don't affect the environment here. Yes. Disco nodded immediately and ordered his subordinates to act. The body was quickly disposed of. Liang said again, I know you have doubts in your heart. It is nothing more than fear that my identity is fake. This is also a reasonable thing. I will not blame you for it. Of course, now my purpose is to communicate with Doflamingo. I believe that you should have a phone bug here, and you can communicate with him directly. So, here I am. Liang directly stated his purpose without concealing it. There is no need for him to hide it. Boss. Disco was a little stunned, the corners of his mouth moved slightly, and said, Lord Liang, are you looking for our boss? Before, he told me about the cooperation, and I didn't have time to talk to him at the time. Now, there are some things to deal with, so I want to contact him first. Liang's face was calm, and he said lightly. No time to deal with clowns. Disco's heart was cold, and his face was full of fear and fear. The number of people in this world who can ignore the clown can be counted on one hand. And Liang definitely has this qualification. Sir, please come with me. Disco took a deep breath, thought for a moment, and nodded. Although he could not determine Liang's identity, it would not hurt to bring Liang in to communicate with Doflamingo. If the real identity is fake, presumably, Doflamingo will definitely be able to identify it. In this way, Disco himself will only be scolded for a few words, and there will be no other consequences. But if Li Ang was prevented from entering, the consequences would be much more serious. I'm afraid that even Brother Doflamingo would not dare to stop Li Ang. The person in charge of his small area, the price of stopping Li Ang is a dead end. Lead the way. Li Ang's extreme knowledge was slightly restrained, and he did not investigate the words in these people's hearts. What these people are thinking, it has nothing to do with him. He just needs to know that his purpose here is enough. But there is no spare time to take care of these people's mental activities. Soon, under the leadership of Disco, Li Ang successfully entered an internal office. Here is the Disco's office. As a person in charge of an auction house, the office is naturally quite spacious and luxurious. My lord, I'll dial the phone bug for you now. Disco took out the phone bug and dialed quickly. In the office, he also installed some people to prevent Li Ang's identity from being fake, and then the real purpose was to do something to him. Chapter 139 _ The Docile Clown, please customize it. In the office, he also installed some people to prevent Li Ang's identity from being fake, and then the real purpose was to do something to him. For the safety of your own life. Disco naturally has to be careful and have to take these safety measures. Boo boo. Disco, what's the matter? A voice appeared. The unique sound quality belonging to Doflamingo is very obvious. My lord, I have an lord here who wants to find you. He said that you had discussed a cooperation with him before. So, I have to make sure that it is true. Disco explained in a low voice, explaining the cause and effect clearly. Eventually, Doflamingo's words came out. Who is it? It's me. Li Ang's mouth moved slightly, stood aside, and said lightly. Suddenly, the other end of the phone bug fell into silence. The strange atmosphere made Disco feel a little weird. He has never seen such a situation as Doflamingo, the terrifying emperor of the underground forces. Lord Li Ang. Doflamingo asked tentatively. I'm here to discuss a partnership with you. Li Ang's mouth moved slightly, sitting on a chair, took the phone bug directly from Disco's hand, and smiled. Far in the New World, Dressrosa, the Highlands of Kings. When he heard Li Ang's voice, Doflamingo jumped up from his chair, his expression full of excitement, and he said quickly, it's naturally my honor for Lord Li Ang to cooperate with me. Before that, help me prepare some materials. As for the interests, you can do it yourself. Don't ask me for the rest of the little things. If it's a big thing, you can tell me. Li Ang held the phone bug and said casually. Aside. Disco was frightened when he heard it. He had never seen someone who could talk to Doflamingo like this, it seemed relaxed and natural. Even, the tone of the opening is a direct order, rather than negotiating with the other party. The most terrifying thing is that Doflamingo on the other end didn't have an angry tone, but still looked very excited, constantly flattering and smiling. Diaresis, my god, is this still the one, the emperor in the underworld, the clown? Disco grabbed his hair and his heart almost broke. Doflamingo's ruthless character is well known, so they are quite in awe of Doflamingo. However, in front of Li Ang, Doflamingo was as docile as a kitten and did not dare to say a word. Instead, he continued to flatter and laugh, which subverted Disco's impression of Doflamingo in his heart. You all go out. Disco came back to his senses, a little nervous, and quickly let his subordinates leave here. This level of dialogue is no longer something they can listen to. After confirming that Li Ang's identity, Li Jiaohao, was correct, Disco was ready to leave. But his mood was not only shocked by Doflamingo's tone, but also by Li Ang's identity. The clown is not angry. The Li Ang in front of him is real. For a moment, Disco's body stiffened, his throat was dry, the corners of his mouth were slightly open, and he didn't say anything. The person in front of him is a terrifying existence that suppresses the Navy headquarters. A scarier monster than Doflamingo the clown. How can Disco's mood be calmed down? The person in front of him is a legendary figure in the world. It's really Lord Li Ang, he wants to reach a cooperation with the clown. Does this mean that we are about to climb a real thigh? Disco was in a surging mood, and his expression showed a strong joy. Being able to cooperate with Liang is equivalent, giving one more layer of protection to his life. This is a terrifying existence that can go head-to-head with the Navy headquarters. Chapter 140-Pluto Rayleigh. Present. Liang told Doflamingo opposite the phone bug all the materials that Moonlight Moria needed. In this regard, Doflamingo was naturally quite excited and agreed, and immediately arranged manpower to prepare these materials for Liang as soon as possible. Even if Kaido cooperates at this time, Doflamingo has to put Liang's affairs at the front of everything. The first task is to make Liang satisfied. In this way, the cooperation between the two parties can be achieved. The cooperation with Liang will bring more benefits to Doflamingo himself. New World. Dressrosa. After Doflamingo hung up the phone bug, the excitement on his face could not be concealed. Young master, what makes you so happy? The little girl Sugar came over and asked with some doubts. From now on, it will take a few laps for our business to expand. Doflamingo's eyes twinkled brightly, he took off his sunglasses, and said. Why? Sugar tilted her head in confusion. Doflamingo rubbed Sugar's hair and explained, because, from today, there will be a terrifying figure who will enter into a cooperative relationship with us. Could it be that it is more terrifying than the four emperors? Sugar continued to ask questions. 113. More terrifying than the four emperors. Doflamingo exhaled heavily, raised his head, looked at the blue sky, and said. Liang is indeed more terrifying than the four emperors. At least, in Doflamingo's heart, that's what he thought. He once witnessed the scene where Liang fought with Garp and other terrifying figures from the Navy headquarters, which he still never forgets. Can Kaido do something similar? Impossible. Doflamingo can be absolutely certain that if it is Kaido, it will never be better than Liang. Not necessarily, they can escape from the hands of the two generals, plus Garp, Sengoku and other four. Or rather, in this world, Liang is the only person who can face this kind of terrifying combat power, and finally not only retreat, but also force the opponent to bow his head. Then I have to be the first to express my sincerity. Doflamingo's eyes flashed, and he called the phone bug again. ... The Great Passage, Chambord, Population Auction. Inside the office. Liang hung up the phone, his face was calm, he glanced at Tang Duo beside him, and was about to speak at the same time. Boo boo. The phone bug rang again. You'll pick it up. Liang said lightly. After reaching a cooperation with Doflamingo, the rest has nothing to do with him. Yes, my lord. Dondo looked respectful, lowered his head, walked to the phone bug, and took out the phone bug. Is there a lot? Doflamingo's voice came out again. Boss. Tang Duo was heartbroken and said. Chapter 140-Pluto Rayleigh. Tang Duo was heartbroken and said. I'll give you an order. From now on, the population auction site of the Chambord Islands will be fully owned by Liang, and you, as a person in charge, are solely responsible for Liang, and you don't need to report to me again. Liang is in charge of all matters. Now, he should be by your side. You can talk to him and assist him throughout the process, understand? Hearing Doflamingo's words, Dondo was shocked. Although the status has indeed been lowered, he was originally the full authority here. But now, above his head, there is a Liang. It's just that he didn't have any complaints. After all, this was Liang. Having Liang as the top person in charge here can effectively avoid a lot of troublesome things. Lord Liang. Tang Duo looked at Liang and asked tentatively. I see. Liang nodded, his face calm. He naturally knew that this was a little thought given to him by Doflamingo. If he wants to cooperate for a longer time, Doflamingo naturally has to please Liang, and his relationship with Liang is closer, so as to ensure that his business can extend farther and be safer. Take me around here, Since this CIAC is under my control, I must understand the structure of this place. Also, tell me on the way how the entire population auction market works. Li Ang glanced at Tang Duo and said bluntly, Sir, please come with me. Tang Duo led Li Ang out of the office and observed the interior of the population auction. A large group of slaves are imprisoned in iron cages of different sizes. Giant warriors, beautiful and coquettish women, etc., all kinds of slaves are not uncommon here, and there are many kinds, making people unable to choose. In the cage, the group of slaves kept silent. They could only stare at Li Ang and Don Duo walking down the middle path with despairing eyes. Their faces were ashen and motionless, as if they were dead. 90% of those who come here have lost the desire to survive. The eyes of these people are very good. Li Ang narrowed his eyes slightly, looked at the slave in the cage, and said, My lord, these people are trained. 100% loyalty is guaranteed, and, around their necks, there is also an explosive collar, so if they act rashly, we can easily kill them. When Dondo said this, a touch of confidence appeared on his face. What if the neck is covered with armed collars? Li Ang couldn't stop talking. Looking into a cage, the corners of his mouth twitched, revealing a meaningful smile. Armed collar. This. Tang Duo was speechless. He wanted to speak several times, but he still didn't say it. If the neck is covered with a domineering armed collar, naturally, it is impossible to be killed by an explosion. However, there are very few slaves who can display the domineering of armed color, and they basically do not appear. Who is he? Li Ang stood at the front of an iron cage, looked at the environment inside, and asked. Where? Don Duo looked at the people in the iron cage and explained, This is a warrior of the giant clan, and also, the captain of the pirate group, the princess of the fallen country. The most important thing is, my lord, and that one, the lovely mermaid lady. She can definitely sell for a sky-high price. Dondo explained with excitement in his eyes. The mermaid that Dondo saw was looking around in despair. She was wearing a green top, with a plump figure and pink fish scales that stood out on her lower body. She's a merman, Kemi. After seeing Kemi, Li Ang already knew which characters were imprisoned here. No. Li Ang shook his head and looked at a silver-haired old man in the cage. He wore glasses and couldn't see any frightened expression. He smiled and said, The person I'm talking about is him. He came over and sold himself. He's a lunatic. He's a coder, so he can sell it for a small price, and put it here to make up for it. My lord, what's wrong? Tang Duo was a little puzzled, scratched his head, and asked.